Hello and welcome to Purely Academic, your potentially educational podcast. This is the monthly stuff for June 2025. I'm Dr. Jonathan Lack. I write about movies. I teach cinema studies at the University of Colorado, and I'm very bleary-eyed from playing a probably unhealthy amount of Switch 2 these last few days.
And I'm Sean Chapman, high school English teacher by day, otaku by night, and I have been freed from the shackles of the school year to now live the most debased and debaucherous life that I can for 2 months until the cycle begins again in August.
Debased and debaucherous for you just meaning more video games and anime?
Yes, it means all the video games and anime I possibly can fit in desperately into this little period where I can be me again.
Well, we'll be talking about a little bit of all of that today because on the docket for today, we are, of course, discussing the Nintendo Switch 2, which just launched, and I have had it for a couple of days, so we will talk about that. We are also going to be reviewing, as sort of an extra topic for this month, the new season of Doctor Who that just finished last week from when we were recording this, and is the most baffling season of Doctor Who I've ever watched, that's for sure. So we have a lot to get into there, and we're going to do some other stuff, including talking about some other games and non-Nintendo Switch news, and I think it'll be a fun one. Sean, how have you been?
I've been great. I've been off for like a week now, basically, or like maybe a week and a half. It's weird that this year was particularly weird in terms of scheduling, because we had the last week where you had final exams and all of that. That ended on Friday, was the last final exam, and then they do a thing at the district that I work at now that I did not do in the district in Colorado, where they have this like checkout process they always do with one extra day at the end of the year that I think is kind of there to sort of cheat the schedule of work days. There's a lot of massaging that happens of how many work days do teachers legally have to have versus how many student days are there. There's a whole thing. But there's always this weird extra checkout day where they're like, you double check all of your grades, and then you have everybody goes to the library. You hand in your sheet with all of your grades and stuff that you've signed and confirmed that these are good to one of the counselors, and they look at it and they go like, yep, those are grades. And I'm like, yes, those are the grades. And then like, and now give me your key, and then now you can go. That's always on an extra day. But because that was Memorial Day on the Monday, so I had like the weekend and Monday off, and then had to go back in on Tuesday morning, but there had been a huge storm and the power was out at the school. So we were all at the school that I work at for a couple of hours in the morning being like, well, we can't do the thing with the grades because the internet doesn't work, so you can't print out all the stuff or do any sign outs. So you're just standing around doing nothing because everyone's done. And then they had us all go to a different campus to go do our sign out in that campus's library. So it was a very weird, strange, protracted experience of having like a 3-day weekend. Then you have like a work day that's not a work day, where you just stand around and wait to tell someone that these are the grades that are the students have. And they go, yep, those are those grades. And I go, yep. And then I leave. But after that, it has just been nothing for the ensuing week. And that's exactly the way that I want my life to be.
It sounds good that you're finally done, I have to say. That sounds stressful up until that point. I've been off of school for a little bit longer, although I've been trying to do a lot of work for the fall to get ready for that. So, and because I knew once the Nintendo Switch 2 arrived, that would just, kill my productivity for a little bit there. But yeah, no, congrats on finishing another school year, Sean.
Yes, very good. I'm very happy to have my summer break. I wish that public education worked in such a way that I could like prepare for the fall, like in college you guys can. But like I have a good idea of what my classes will be, but I do not have a rock solid like this is definitely what your periods are going to be. This is 100% what you're going to be teaching. I do not know for sure if I will be doing the English as a second language classes next year. I probably won't, but I might be. Who knows? And so that's being a public high school teacher. It's a weird job.
All right, we have a busy episode to get into though today, Sean. So do you want to just jump right into it and get into our stuff?
Yes. What have you been up to, Jonathan?
Well, first off, in terms of housekeeping, just wanted to mention to everyone that Japanimation Station Season 5, our grand tour, just finished this past weekend with our episode on Dragon Ball Daima. So if you have not listened to those 13 episodes that we aired these last few months, you definitely should. There's so much good stuff in there. We also, at the end of the Daima episode, did announce our plans for Season 6. You all knew it was going to be our Tomino-thon, where we're going to review all the shows of one Mr. Tomino Yoshiyuki, the creator of Mobile Suit Gundam. but we did specify exactly which shows those would be, so you can get started on your anime homework alongside us. So that'll be coming soon. Then in terms of stuff, Sean, it sounds like you've been playing a certain Doom game, and I just wanted to mention before you get into it that I have not played this game yet because I was just playing some other stuff. The game comes out, it's a $70 game, and I have to say all the reviews were positive, but with a sort of like, yeah, it's good. Yeah, and then I kind of was like, I don't know if that sounds like a $70 game to me, and I'm about to pay $500 for the Switch, so I will probably hold off for a little bit, but your opinion is the one that matters most to me on these sorts of things, so you tell me, Sean, how are you enjoying Doom, The Dark Ages?
Yeah, so first of just like because I've been doing a lot of Doom because we had our Doom podcast where I did Doom 1 and 2 alongside a lot of other stuff. Then I played Doom: The Dark Ages. I intentionally did not replay Doom 2016 or Eternal leading up to that because I knew the Doom: The Dark Ages, like Eternal, is very different, right? So like one cool thing about id or modern id and what they've done with these Doom games is all three of these games, 2016, Eternal, The Dark Ages, they're all very different, much more different than like normal first-person shooter sequels are, which are usually like, we add some more weapons, here's a couple new enemies, we made a new campaign, maybe you have your multiplayer, and here you go. It's kind of like more of the same, like a Call of Duty or Halo. They'll refine some stuff, but they don't like overhaul stuff. Doom Eternal and Doom: The Dark Ages is the same way. They like totally kind of rethink the approach to the fundamental combat, and people who've played Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal know what that's like. This is like yet again a different kind of variation on that idea. And so I intentionally did not want to be like all doomed up with like my muscle memory from Doom Eternal coming into Doom: The Dark Ages. But I played Doom: The Dark Ages, and I have since then, now I have replayed Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. And I'll talk about that a little bit after Doom: The Dark Ages. But that has been my dooming. I've been doomed up. And in fact, I've been playing the DLC for Eternal. I'm like halfway through the DLC, The Ancient Gods, which I never played for Doom Eternal. But Doom: The Dark Ages, so this is a prequel, narratively speaking. Not that is
not that really matters.
Yes, but it is like if you know the lore of the modern Doom stuff. And I will say that this does make that lore more interesting than it's been for me previously, because it makes it kind of tangible. It's set when the Doomslayer is in like an alternate dimension called Argent Dur, or Denur, where that's when he becomes the Doomslayer, right? He was the Doom guy. He does all of his Doom guy stuff. He then ends up in this alternate dimension where he becomes the Doomslayer and is like way more powerful. And then Doom 2016 is after he had been encased in a fucking sarcophagus for a billion years, and then he's unearthed by Samuel Hayden and all of that. So this is kind of like, what was he doing in that alternate dimension, fighting the demons alongside like weird medieval night magic people. And so that's kind of like the Dark Ages idea of it. And what they've done with the combat, the thing that's really sort of fundamentally different is that they have given you this shield. And so the whole combat system is designed around how the shield works. The shield can parry. And so enemies will have both physical attacks and ranged attacks that will have a green glow on them, and you can parry those, and that will usually then reflect the attack back, or there are like different power-ups you get that do things when you do parries, like an electrical shock that stuns enemies, or it shoots out like ethereal daggers that go and stab them and shit like that. You can also do a shield charge that is like a dash that goes ridiculously far. Like you can cover most of like a combat area with one of these dashes, and that also does a huge amount of damage. And then you can also throw the shield Captain America style, and that just like anything that's a kind of like a grunt level enemy, it will just cut them in half and go through and just like slaughter swaths of demons that are smaller, and then bigger demons, it will get stuck in them and then stun them while you can just load them full of rocket shots and shit like that. So the whole combat is designed around the notion of the shield as a very direct kind of turn away from Doom Eternal, where Doom Eternal's combat is all about acrobatics. It's about you're very fast, you've got a double jump, you've got a double dash in Doom Eternal, you've got the hook on the super shotgun. So in Doom Eternal, you are meant to be incredibly agile, moving around the battlefield super quickly, moving around enemies, moving around projectiles and stuff like that. Whereas like Doom: The Dark Ages, it's more like it's kind of almost Sekiro-like in mentality, where you see attacks coming and you want to get in the way of those attacks and parry them, or use the shield. You can just use the shield to block regular attacks as well. And so it's much more what in their marketing, they say like stand your ground or whatever. But it's this idea of, instead of me maneuvering around things and it being about the raw agility of the Doomslayer, it's about your ability to sort of like plant your feet, pick like how you're going to approach these enemies and then use all the shield abilities to just like demolish enemies incredibly quickly and to kind of like tank damage very fast. And it's got a lot of other kind of the basic setup of the modern Doom games, like killing enemies will drop health pickups. There are ways to kill enemies that gives you ammo, all that kind of stuff that all the modern Doom games have. A lot of those building blocks are here, but the combat feels very fundamentally different because of the shield. And I will say that it took a while for it to click for me. And I've seen this from a lot of people, where the first like probably 5 levels or so are very slow, and it's kind of like it takes a while for you to kind of get enough tools for you to kind of get the combat cycle going properly. And so it did take a while for me to get into it. Once I got into it, I do think the back half of the game is incredibly fun. So once you have all of your abilities, you've got all the different weapons. All the weapons have 2 different modes. So instead of alt fires, because all of your shield stuff is on what would be the alt fires, it's L2 and all of that is the shield. Instead, like the guns transform into different versions. So you have like a nail gun that is your machine gun equivalent, and then that can turn into a kind of like pseudo sniper gun that does headshots. And when you do headshots, it blows the enemy up and that kills more enemies. All the different weapons have 2 different variations that they can swap between. So you have a lot of different weapons, you get a lot of different abilities, and once all of that is in and you're on level like 8 or so, that to the end of the game I think is incredibly fun. And yeah, that is like my overall like big picture take on it, is like I do think it is not as good as Doom 2016 or Eternal, but it's only like a little bit weaker than those games to me. I think it's like that sense of pacing is a little off, and then that sense of like unlike those games, which I think are very fun just from the jump, like the basics of just the shotgun and the movement and all that is enough. Doom, the Dark Ages is very much built around like you have to have all the different stuff available for you for the combat mechanics to make sense. Like the shield only functions in the central combat kind of dance appropriately once you've got the runes that activate effects when you parry and all that kind of stuff. And I suspect that that's partially where like the reviews are, because what you said with the reviews of like a lot of people like it's a really fun game, but that's kind of where I'm at with Doom the Dark Ages as well. It's like it's a very fun game, it's very well worth playing, but I also see the like, is it something you necessarily have to get for full price? Probably not, because it is just the campaign. I mean, that's all you really need, but they did not do the multiplayer stuff. It is a weirdly anemic feeling package, especially if you compare it to Doom Eternal, which, like, regardless of how you feel about the way the combat changed in Doom Eternal was like a very premium feeling package. It had a lot of content. You had the whole like hub thing with the Fortress of Doom that had extra secrets and stuff and all the cheats that you could go back into levels and play them different ways. Doom the Dark Ages is very basic. It's just like a single campaign. It's a long campaign. It took me probably about like 16-ish hours to play through. So like it's a meaty piece of content. And you do have modifiers you can put on that change like the gameplay speed or make things easier or harder. So you can do replays and stuff like that. But it is weirdly kind of basic of when you load up the game, it's just like the only option there basically is new game and options. Like there's no extra features really. There's not that kind of whole suite of kind of presentation that Doom Eternal had. And Doom 16 had a bit of that. It had the like snap map. It had the multiplayer mode. It had a little bit of extra stuff on there. Doom the Dark Ages feels like a very kind of lean package that makes it feel like it should be like a $50 game. Even if the actual campaign is super premium and very high quality, the packaging around the game doesn't present it like that. So that's kind of like the core gameplay stuff. Other things about the game, it is very gorgeous. This is their new version of id Tech. I think they're on id Tech 8 at this point. It's got, if you've seen the Digital Foundry breakdown, that's a great video that goes into some of the technical stuff. But the big thing about the game is that it is really big open areas with lots of enemies, like way, way more enemies than Doom and Doom Eternal had. And so all the combat is designed around these much bigger arenas where you've got a lot of stuff coming at you. And there's just kind of, they've opened up the kind of tiers of enemies where it feels like previously there was like 3 different kind of tiers or maybe 4 tiers of enemy, like super nothing fodder enemies that are there for you to chainsaw, like imps and the soldiers. And then you've got like cacodemons, hell knights, that stuff, and then maybe boss enemies. This has like a lot more kind of layers of, okay, this is a truly fodder enemy. The imps and the soldiers are basically only a little bit stronger than those. Like, they are basically been relegated to being, you kill them in a single shot and they're kind of like nothing. And then there are lots more kind of layers of enemies that feel like there are different levels of difficulty that kind of tier up that experience. So that way, when you have these big open arenas, they can fill them with lots of enemies without you being totally overrun. And that's something that's very fun, that harkens back to Doom 2, the original Doom 2, that also just throws stupid numbers of enemies on the screen that it could do then in sprites. Now in a 3D polygonal game, you just don't usually play first-person shooters that have this quantity of enemies on the screen, especially ones that don't look this good, because it is a really gorgeous game. It's using ray trace global illumination even on consoles, and it looks really good. It's got that effect, like I've been playing Assassin's Creed Shadows, which has the same kind of stuff, where everything sits really nicely in the environment. Like, you don't have things popping out weirdly because the lighting applies to it differently, like collapsible or breakable objects or things that can be destroyed in traditional baked lighting systems can't have the baked lighting, right? And so they always kind of stand out, almost like animation cells in an old cartoon where you know what's going to move or what's part of the background because it's in kind of a lower fidelity. Here, everything blends really nicely, and there's a really impressive physics system where you can just crush the environment. Like, they make the Doomslayer feel big and very, very powerful because you just stomp through wooden shacks and stone barriers and shit, and you just kind of smash right through it, and it breaks into, actual small little pieces that all have real physics that bounce around the environment. Demons chunk up into big gore chunks when you kill them, and that system is very elaborate and very satisfying. So when you get to that back half of the game, and the game just like clicks and you get into the kind of flow state, the way in which the environment and the enemies react to what you as the player do and the gunfire and all of that is really next level. Like, it's really, really, really awesome, and is one of the biggest, I think, clear upgrades from 2016 and Doom Eternal is just that sense of reactivity that the environment has. It's just like really awesome. It feels like a kind of mid 2000s PC game in that way, when physics post Half-Life 2 were just like a very big deal that every game was bragging about, here's our weird physics shit. And then we kind of lost that a little bit in the 360 PS3 generation. It feels like we're kind of coming back to that a little bit with this game, and that is very, very cool. So that's my like big picture take on Doom: The Dark Ages. I do think it's a game, if you've liked 2016 and Eternal, it's very much worth playing, but like, if you're not like chomping at the bit, like feeling like I really, really want to play a new first-person shooter campaign, which, to be fair, we get almost none of these games like this anymore. Like, it is like a nearly dead genre, the single-player first-person shooter, outside of like indie PC games. But unless you're like really chomping at the bit for it, I probably would wait for a sale.
Yeah, and that's what I'm doing. Again, I am definitely excited to play it, because all of that sounds fun. It just doesn't necessarily sound $70 right now fun when I'm also like getting a bunch of Nintendo stuff. So yeah, but I am excited to check that out at some point, hopefully before, we do year-end stuff in December and January. In terms
Before we move on,
yeah.
I want to say, for the record, now that I have played all of these games and now replayed them, Doom Eternal is easily the best of the modern Doom games, and it's not even close. Like, having replayed it, Doom Eternal is like so ridiculously fucking good. That game is crazy good. And I just it was just like a big rediscovery for me. If I knew I really loved that game, but holy fucking shit, Doom Eternal kicks ass. And it is definitely, if I'm naming like the king, or if I'm layering these up, Doom: The Dark Ages is like the weakest. There's a little bit of a gap in Doom 2016, which is still a very good game, but it maybe feels a little basic coming back to it now. And then there's like a big jump up in its Doom Eternal, and that is where I'm at with my redooming that I have done this summer so far.
Well, maybe I will, when I play Dark Ages, I will also have to replay Eternal, and then we can have an official debate where we get someone to moderate and we do pros and cons and opening statements, and it'll be great.
We won't need that, because you'll replay it and you'll realize that I'm right.
Okay, so, we'll see.
It wouldn't even need to be a debate.
All right. Have they patched out that enemy I hated that shows up every 5 seconds?
The Marauder, that you fight the Marauder, I don't know, is that the one you're thinking of, that you have to counter when he attacks you? That's like a kind of mini boss enemy.
Yeah, and he shows up all the fucking time. I hated
There's
that.
like 4 or 5 of them in the main campaign.
I hate it. And there's dozens of us. Dozens. All right. Can I talk about something extremely different, Sean?
Yes, I want to hear about an anime that I assume is also about like slaughtering hordes of demon and just like, you know, the horrible gory nightmare that you put out into the world. I assume that's what this show is about, Jonathan.
Well, Sean, last month you talked about a classic anime you had been watching, Nadia, Secret of Blue Water, the Ano Hideaki anime. Well, I am teaching in the fall a class at the University of Colorado on Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata, which is very cool. I actually pitched it as a tour studies class on Miyazaki specifically, because I thought that'll be popular. And they said, yeah, well, of course, yeah. But then they said, well, what if we brought in Takahata and did a little more about Ghibli? And I said, well, if we're going to bring in Takahata, we're making it 50-50, because I'm not doing the like Miyazaki and Takahata on the side, because I feel like that's unfair to Takahata. So it has become an auteur studies class about the two of them, and I am definitely putting a lot of focus on their pre-Ghibli work, because it's stuff students will not have seen. A lot of it is stuff I've had to import or find online. You know, most of it has never been distributed here. And one of the big things that, like, this was a big bucket list thing that I had never watched in full that I know I needed to, is a show that is sometimes considered Takahata's, like, masterpiece or sort of crowning work. Certainly this is Miyazaki himself said this of this work, which is the 1974 TV anime Heidi, Girl of the Alps, which is based on the Joanna Spiri novel. And it is, like, it's not literally the first world masterpiece theater show, but it is the world masterpiece theater show.
I mean,
is like,
we covered the first world masterpiece theater show before it was even world masterpiece. That's the original Dororo.
Yes, and Heidi is also technically Kalpis theater, Kalpis manga theater. It says that at the beginning of each episode, which is what started with Dororo. But the series is world masterpiece theater. Heidi is the thing that, like, most often I think gets referenced. It is like one of the most classic anime in Japan. It's funny because America is basically the only country where this show never became big. This show was absolutely huge throughout, obviously, you know, greater East Asia, but also much of the Anglosphere, much of Europe. You know, it was really big in Germany. It was really big in France, like all of these countries. It just never came here, and it still never had any kind of official release in the US. But you can find it pretty easily. It's a 52-episode anime. It is a classic for many, you know, reasons. It is also a landmark in that it had many innovations, including the biggest innovation of the show is that it is where the layout system of anime comes from, where there's that in-between step from storyboarding to key animation, where you'll know in modern anime, usually key animators also do detailed layouts of every shot, which is a single image showing, it's basically taking the storyboard image and making it more detailed, so everybody involved in that shot, background artist, in-betweeners, and anyone else who winds up working on it, has a better idea of what it is. That was basically innovated by Hayao Miyazaki for Heidi, and his credit on the show is basically layouts, not written the way we write it now, but that is basically his big credits, and Miyazaki did the layouts for almost every shot of the entire show because, you know, maniac.
Yeah.
And just a very different time also. But it's a show where, like, every creative lead on it is one of the absolute giants of anime, from Takahata and Miyazaki to Kotabe Yoichi, doing all the character design and animation direction. Just, you know, giants. The composer for the show is Takeo Watanabe, who is the composer for Mobile Suit Gundam. And it has a very, very similar Gundam-esque sad song, where, you know how Gundam at the end of episodes when Amuro is sad, it starts with it does the horn piece that everyone remembers, the dun, 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 but it usually leads into that with this little piano lick, and that piano lick is kind of the same in Heidi, and then it goes into a different melody, but it's kind of funny. But I had always known the reputation of this show. I'm about halfway through it now. I'm about 28 episodes in. It's 52. This might be the best anime I've ever seen. It would be competitive with Mobile Suit Gundam 79 for that title. It is an unbelievable masterpiece. Like, it's one of those shows where it's 52 episodes. You keep waiting for the down episode, the one where, like, it feels like they're killing time, or that the animation is subpar or something like that, and it just never comes. It is so unbelievably solid throughout. I think the thing that puts it above pretty much any other TV anime I've seen is just the execution of mise-en-scène. And that is both the, you know, because they did a huge, you know, scouting trip to the Alps to get data to, draw the show. And so all of the backgrounds are absolutely stunning. The art direction of the show is just out of this world, and it's all watercolor. It's just tremendously beautiful. But then it is everything else too. It is the way like shots are blocked. It is that, incredibly virtuosic layout system that Miyazaki is doing for the composition of it. It is the storyboarding, it is the editing, it is all those pieces of mise-en-scène, and it is the way it is. It truly is kind of like, I think, the kind of Ghibli work, even though obviously it's about, 10, 15 years before Studio Ghibli is a thing. It is that crew. And it is so much about like pastoral life and seeing the world through the eyes of a child and sort of, that coming of age story, but in a very, very gentle way. And I just have never seen anything quite like it, even from the Ghibli crew. It really is out of this world tremendous, because it's about this little girl who is an orphan. She's been raised for her first 5 years by her aunt, Dede, and Dede brings her to her grandfather, the Alm uncle, because he lives on the Alm mountain, and he is a man who's been kind of ostracized by the local community, and so she's kind of, everyone in the community thinks it's crazy to leave this little girl with him, but he very much opens up to Heidi, and they have this very sort of idyllic life there before other kind of problems come in, including the uncle's own stubbornness in not wanting Heidi to interact with the people of the village and all of this stuff. But, for the first, it's very much a show of thirds. The first third is in the Alps on the Alm mountain. Then, as in the novel, Heidi gets taken by Didi again and gets sent away to Frankfurt, where she lives with a different family. And then the final third is her coming back to the Alps. But it is those chunks, and that first chunk is just so virtuosic in how it depicts Heidi living on the Alm, meeting this boy from the village, Peter, who is the goat herd, and she goes every day and spends time with the goats. It's got the best animal animation I think I've ever seen in anything. Even, it's simpler than, a Disney Lady and the Tramp 101 Dalmatians, but it is possibly even more expressive in just how these simple lines create these incredible characters out of the goats and the dogs and the other livestock who are not really anthropomorphized, but are just given enough of a heightened characterization that they feel so real. And it is a show, it really is also kind of a precursor to, I think, the slice of life genre, in that it is so much about the atmosphere. The plots are fairly minimal, and each episode sort of is about, a day in the life, but it is about the passing of seasons and of time and of things changing very glacially and slowly. But it really is incredible. It has its reputation for a reason. I completely understand why Miyazaki felt that this was Takahata's crowning achievement. It's just a tremendous show, and I'm having to scramble my syllabus to figure out how long do I spend on Heidi? Because I can't show all 52 episodes.
Right.
But I think I need to show more than 3 or 4. That's where I'm at. I might need to make this a 2 or 3 day project, not a 1 day. Because it really is extraordinary. And I do think it is something of a Rosetta Stone for so much of what Takahata certainly, but also Miyazaki, were up to in the years after, where I think this is the first thing they did where you really see their vision and their sort of ethic come to the fore in a really clear way that feels completely uncompromised. And so as a landmark of, Japanese animation history, it is second to none. And I'm having a ton of fun going through that show. It's not really a show that I can binge because it's not that kind of series, but it's a, 2 or 3 episodes a day, extremely pleasing kind of show. And just, people need to see it. It's incredible.
Awesome, yeah. It's obviously it's on my list, along with stuff like Chie the Brat, that I want to get to at some point. And Chie the Brat has a discotheque release, so that's what I've always eyeballed, potentially picking up. I do want to, because you mentioned it when you were talking about Heidi. I do want to do a quick update on Nadia. I still have not finished that show.
Oh my god.
That the deserted island arc it's a hell of a thing. I am because I kind of stopped at a certain point while this was still working, and then once summer break started, I started watching a little bit again. I'm now at the point where I'm probably just going to do a big session and finish the last chunk, because I'm now at the part where supposedly the plot happens again. But oh my god, that fucking they're like on that island forever, and then there's like another island drifts over, and they go from the first island, and then they have episodes on a second deserted island, which is like how long it happens that like we have to move to another island. Then eventually the characters all decide we need to go to Africa, but it's very confusing because the reason for going to Africa is no longer relevant to the plot and hasn't been for like 20 episodes, because the whole thing was originally Nadia thought that she was from Africa because she's dark-skinned and she doesn't know where she was born. And so she's like, I want to go to Africa to find out where I'm from. But over the course of the show, you learn that she's not from Africa. She's like an Atlantean princess. Like, you learn that her dad is Captain Nemo, and she learns that. Like, she knows that. And yet, once they're on the island and they're like, it's time to move off the island, she's like, and let's go to Africa to find out where I'm from. I'm like, what do you mean? We've been to where you from. We met your dad. We spent fucking 20 episodes with your dad. Why are we still going to Africa? They go to Africa for a couple of episodes, and those episodes are fucking terrible. And then they're en route, where the last episode I watched, they're en route to like where the actual plot should start again. And then they have what is one of the weirdest episodes I've ever seen in any anime ever. I just watched this 2 days ago. It's technically a clip episode, right? Like but I wouldn't call it a recap episode, because they are flying to this like other place they're trying to get to. And then you have a whole episode that's like, I don't know if you technically call it a musical episode, because the characters are not contextually singing the songs. But they basically took, I believe they were character songs already made. They were not made for this episode with the exception of one. But all the characters have their like character song thing, right? This is a common practice, especially today. It was still happening in the 80s and early 90s in anime. And so you have the voice actors sing songs that are themed around the characters. And they just did a clip episode where they sing those songs and they play the songs over just edited clips of the previous show. And it's like very, very disorienting of like, why the fuck are we just listening to character songs all of a sudden? And it doesn't perform a recap function because you can't follow the plot. You're just there to watch basically 5 or 6 AMVs of Nadia over the character songs. And the most hilarious thing is I was so fascinated by this that I looked it up. The people who worked on the episode apparently all used pseudonyms because they're so embarrassed by the fact that they had to do this desperate move. But also, the funniest part to me is that the choice to do this episode like this way, rather than a regular recap episode, also meant that the production of the episode was actually incredibly fucking grueling, totally defeating the point of having a recap episode, because the fucking editor had to edit like 6 different music videos using clips from 30 plus episodes of anime, which is a huge amount of work to do. And it's way more editing work than they would do on a normal episode of this fucking show. And so the dude had to work like crazy overtime hours to put together this fucking stupid ass recap episode that's terrible. And then now supposedly the show's supposed to get back to the plot for like 5 episodes and finish. I'm very excited to see that happen. But man, Nadia is a weird, weird fucking anime. It's one of the strangest shows I've ever watched in terms of the huge swings in quality and style. I've just never seen anything like this, and it's fucking crazy.
Man, it makes it, Neon Genesis Evangelion has some well-known issues with pace and material resources, obviously. It makes it feel like the biggest leap in the history of anime production if you remember that Nadia is what they did before that, right?
Yes, like it would be like if Neon Genesis Evangelion had 13 more episodes at the 2/3 point, and all of those episodes were just Shinji and one other character on an island getting into Looney Tunes hijinks. And then eventually they have to decide, and then now we're going to get back to the like world-ending like adolescent drama bullshit, and we have to go back into that after doing jokes about Shinji fucking getting high on magic mushrooms and accidentally kissing Asuka while he's high, which is a thing that happens between John and Nadia in an episode of Nadia: The Secret of Blue Water.
That's amazing. But, Sean, you said you're interested in watching Heidi Girl of the Alps. I will tell you, Sean, by the time I'm ready to teach this class, I will have a season of Japanimation Station ready to go. I will have the notes, because I've been doing all the cast and crew listings, all the stuff we do. I'm getting ready. So I think the season I would do out of this specifically would be pre-Ghibli, like basically Horus, Prince of the Sun, leading up to probably like Nausicaa as the season finale. And I think that would be really fun to do. So, but because I'm putting it all together, and I have a mind of like, if there's a little extra work I have to do for it that will eventually go to the podcast, I'm just doing it now because like, it'll be good for that. I have one other funny story from my prep work, Sean, which is that one of the other World Masterpiece Theater shows I want to show the students at least a little bit of is Anne of Green Gables, which is actually the last time Takahata and Miyazaki worked together in that way, because Miyazaki leaves that show midway through to do Castle of Cagliostro, and from then on out he never works for anyone else again. He's always the director. But anyway, Anne of Green Gables I discovered, so a lot of these shows have compilation movies or OVAs or things that Miyazaki and Takahata not only did not work on, but disowned and took their names off of because they did not believe in it. But Anne of Green Gables does have a compilation movie that Takahata personally oversaw in 2010 for like an anniversary event. And it is basically just the first 6 episodes, which, if you know the story Anne of Green Gables, it basically tells the arc of Anne coming to Green Gables up to the point where she is truly welcomed by the family, who aren't sure if they're going to keep her at first. And so that has a compilation movie. I tracked that down. It was very hard to find online. I did finally find that an Australian label, Madman, had done a Blu-ray of it, and I went, awesome. So I ordered it. It actually came from New Zealand. It took like 3 weeks to arrive. And I got it, and I watched it. Blu-ray's fine. Everything's good. It's a really good compilation movie because it doesn't have to cut much. It's kind of your ideal compilation movie in that it is just all the stuff cut together with no, big gaps. And that show is also just breathtakingly amazing. There's some just incredible stuff in it. The one problem with this Blu-ray, Sean, and here's a problem I have never, ever seen before. The subtitles turn off 5 minutes before the end of the movie, and there are just no English subtitles for the last 5 minutes. It's probably like a glitch in the subtitle track, but they are just missing. Now, the dialogue in those 5 minutes was simple enough that I understood it all. So I have 2 options here for my students, Sean. I could either rip the Blu-ray and just add those 5 minutes of subtitles myself. It wouldn't be that much work. Or the funnier option is I just play the Blu-ray I have, and I just have to shout out what they're saying to my students for those 5 minutes. What do you think I should do?
Or you could just, get like a bunch of big pieces of poster card and write the lines, and then when the time comes, you just stand up there and then drop each poster card for each line.
Yes.
That is very funny. That reminds me of been watching Ultraman Gaia, the next Ultraman show, which I'm sure I'll talk about on next month's Purely Academic. And for all the other Ultraman shows up till this point, they've had subtitles for the songs, for like the opening and ending themes. But for Ultraman Gaia, for whatever reason, they stopped doing that. And my dad likes reading the lyrics to these very, very silly songs because it's the stupidest fucking lyrics you've ever heard. And they didn't have the English lyrics, but they had like just on the image, like burned into the image from the original production, is just the Japanese subtitles. So while we were watching it, I was just like trying to live translate this, like, and he stands for courage and goes off into space for the sake of mankind, or just like the dumbest fucking kid show bullshit lyrics. But it reminded me of that. And so yes, you should just shout out from the back what they're saying.
The funniest one is the last line of the movie is Matthew Cuthbert saying to Anne something. It's the line. It ends with the Japanese title of the book, which is Green Gables no An. But basically, if you were to do the like crude live translation version, it's from this day henceforth you shall be known as Anne of Green Gables. And I think that would be a very funny thing to say over the dialogue as it's going.
Yeah, like she's a fucking superhero or something. Yes.
Really, like, if you were to do the artistic translation, I think he's more saying, you now belong to Green Gables. This is where you belong. But because it is the title of the book, you want to do the stupid, fucking, you are now Anne of Green Gables. But anyway, yeah. Yes. Weird problem with that Blu-ray. That Blu-ray also has a weird thing where Japanese is just the original 4:3. The movie looks great. If you want to watch it with the English dub, which you don't because it's a bad English dub, but if you did, it's cropped to 16:9. And I have no idea why. I guess they just thought if you want to watch this 70s anime in English, you also want to watch it with like 30% of the image missing. Very weird.
Although, honestly, that's probably the correct call.
That's probably the correct call.
They are probably right.
Yes.
That if you're watching in the English dub, you also probably just want it to fill the whole screen and you don't give a shit. Is it an Australian accented dub, if it's an Australian DVD?
No, it's all British. It sounds cobbled together from an old dub, like when the show was new, like from the 70s or 80s. Because like the recording quality does not sound like 2010s. But yeah, the like history of all the dubs of these shows, because some of them, like Heidi, I think Heidi's only English dub is a South African English dub. So like they're all weird, and a lot of them are not, completely extant because it was just a very different time. But yeah, there's a lot of provenance research you could do here with the different dubs of these shows.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's fun about those discotheque releases is they do a good job of trying to track down every weird, obscure dub they possibly can. It's just like, how did they find this? Just like insane. It's like the movie had a different title. All the characters have different names. Like fucking Mystery of Mamo was like that.
Yep.
Yeah, I love, even though I don't want to actually watch any of these things that way, I just love just sort of appreciating the existence of like weird, obscure anime dubs from like the 80s.
Yeah, or briefly switching over when you hear something like, I need to know how they did that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely Discotheque. I'm sure I'm not telling them anything they don't already know. They would be the perfect label for all of these old Ghibli, like Heidi shows, Anne of Green Gables, all of that stuff. And I'm sure it is just a rights issue to get those. But man, I hope they get that someday, because they would be the right label to do all this. Anyway, you want to move on to some news before we get into Nintendo stuff?
So obviously you've been in the Nintendo Switch 2 mines,
Yes.
So you'll cover all that stuff. But there has been some other news because this is not E3 season. This is when we all assemble and sort of mourn over the death of E3, if you want to mourn it, or just go like, man, video games just used to be different. It's like, This shit's all weird now. But there has been some announcements to talk about. First, I just want to do a follow-up from something we talked about on last month's Purely Academic, when we talked about Polygon being effectively dissolved. I mean, it's not like literally gone, but it's more or less gone. And then at the same time, Giant Bomb was seemingly falling apart from fandom. But there is a silver lining to that cloud for Giant Bomb, not for Polygon, unfortunately. Polygon's still fucked. But Giant Bomb actually bought their independence from fandom. So it is now an independently owned company. They've kept the website. All the people who are currently working for Giant Bomb have all come back and stuff, and they are making content. They're doing crazy Giant Bomb like E3 style live streams, even if it's not E3. So not a lot to say there other than that's just fucking cool. That's incredibly rare. It almost never happens because these companies are so fucking greedy that they want the rights to the thing, even if they are strangling the thing to death. They're like, but we can't let anyone else have this thing that we're killing. This is our thing to kill. And so it's very, very rare. So credit to fandom as a company that they actually sold that to Giant Bomb, because a lot of people from other existing or from websites that no longer exist in the video game journalism space have since come out and all basically said, yeah, we all tried to do the same thing and the fuckers wouldn't sell us the goddamn site. So wow, this is really cool. So a shout out to that. That's very awesome.
It's wonderful news. It came out, I feel like, right after we released or recorded that last episode, and so we just missed it. So I'm glad you put it on here, Sean, because I'd kind of forgotten. But it's obviously a great day for games journalism when something like this can happen. And yeah, credit definitely to fandom for agreeing to do that. Because also you assume that Giant Bomb, the people did not have, an insane offer they were able to make. But I am glad they were able to do it, and hopefully sets a precedent going forward, because once this has happened once in a high-profile way, there is a precedent that people can point to, and that's great.
Yes, so very good, and I'm glad that Giant Bomb still gets to live to fight another day. But then let's get into the next set of things where Sony had their State of Play. Basically, the state of this year's not E3. It's been interesting to see this stuff evolve. So we have kind of three different shows. There was the Sony State of Play. A little bit after that, like a day or two, you had Jeff Keighley's Summer Game Fest. It is game singular, not game plural. I always want to call it the Summer Games Fest, but it's just the Summer Game Fest. And then after that, and actually today while we're recording, Jonathan is adding something to the outline that was announced while we were recording, is the Xbox Game Showcase, I think is what they call these. And this has been interesting. I did not watch any of these. I just kind of went through the announcements afterwards, because my days of watching this shit live ended when they stopped doing proper live shows and big, like, let's all get like CEOs to stand on the stage and look like idiots as game demos break. As soon as it all went like digital when E3 died, I just lost interest in it. But we kind of have some news stories together. I think the interesting thing this year is it feels like PlayStation and Xbox have basically just strangled the Summer Game Fest. Like, Jeff Keighley had almost nothing to show other than Resident Evil, which we'll talk about. But it was just a lot of like obscure, like third-person action Souls-like games that all kind of blend together, and some indie games that kind of blend together, and almost nothing kind of like a large-scale third-party publisher-style announcement. But Sony had quite a few cool announcements, and Xbox have had some cool announcements. Obviously, at this point, Xbox owns like half of the third-party publishers anyways, so of course they've got all the Activision stuff they can do. But let's start with some of the Sony ones. So Sony had another trailer for Digimon Story Time Stranger, Game of the Year 2025, we're already calling it. It's all guaranteed to be. And that trailer also came with a release date that I know, Jonathan, you're happy about because it's October 3rd, 2025, the week of your birthday.
I'm happy about it. Also, that if you look at like the first week of October, it is D-Day. There are so many games coming out. The week after this is the new Pokemon on Switch 2. It's just insane. October is going to be very busy for video games.
Well, Pokemon can get fucked because, Pokemon's going to sell insane numbers of copies, but Digimon Story will be the better game. And as a long time, as a Digimon fan, I am very used to this pattern. Like, Digimon's better. I swear it's better. But fucking Pokemon's the thing that sells all the fucking copies and the cards and all that stuff. And everyone watches the damn show.
Well, again, yes, I will probably play both, but Digimon will hopefully take precedence. They're still saying this is PS5 and Xbox. I hope this gets a Switch 2 announced. It would be baffling to me if this does not come to Switch 2, but we shall see.
Yeah, I would guess that it probably will get ported later, because I just assume this game is too long in development by the time the Switch 2 stuff. Because one Switch 2 story we never talked about is that there is pretty clear reporting that Nintendo was fairly restrained with giving out development kits. They did the same thing with Nintendo Switch 1, so I would not expect, like, as we've seen at the Summer Game Fest, like, there is not a huge wave of like new third-party games announced for the Switch 2 yet. I think that will start happening in 6 months to a year from now is when you will really start seeing that happen. And I assume probably Time Stranger will get a port at that point. Because remember, the original Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth was a fucking Vita game that got ported to the
Well,
PS4.
that's why I'm saying that, is that, yeah, it just would make sense, but we shall see. I want to play it regardless. I'm very excited for it. It looks great. It's the kind of thing where I'm scrubbing through the trailers to look at images, but I don't really want to spoil myself on anything, because I know I'm going to play it and love it, and I don't need to, like, be previewed on it.
Yes. Very excited for that one. Next up, another game I'm excited about. We've known this for a while. IO Interactive, the developers of the Hitman games, have been working on a 007 game, but we've not had any clear reveals. But we got our first trailer for it. It's called 007 First Light. It's seemingly kind of like an origin, or like, maybe not origin, but like early James Bond story, like him kind of coming into the 007 stuff. And it's, it is a gameplay focused trailer, but it doesn't give you like a sense. I don't think I have like a clear answer to exactly what is the gameplay. You see clear shades of Hitman in it, but there's also more actiony stuff. There's like driving cars, which you'd expect in James Bond. There's more shooting stuff than depending on how you play Hitman, there can be a lot of shooting stuff in Hitman, but it's not like the main focus for that. But it is.
If you play Hitman like me, there's a lot of shooting stuff. If you play Hitman like Sean, aka the right way, there's not as much shooting stuff.
Until you just decide to say, fuck it, I'm going to play the Colorado level and just kill every single NPC to see if I can. And just like really stare deep into your soul for about 45 minutes, what is a very long process. But yes, typically not as much action there. But I'm very excited for this game. It's still like such a cool pairing of IP and developer. It's been a long time since there was a James Bond game. And also it's clear from that trailer that they're doing the James Bond stuff. Like, it's not the thing that I feel like James Bond games have historically done, especially since GoldenEye, which is like, let's make a game that does one slice of what James Bond is. Like, we'll do the first person shooter or whatever. Here it just seems like they're trying to create a modern idea of a James Bond game, which is like, let's create a single game that expresses the whole nature of this character and what he does with the gadgets and the cars and all this stuff. And the stealth and the like suave getting into places he's not supposed to be, right? That's all the Hitman thing that has a lot of synergy with James Bond. So I'm very excited to see more of that game. I'm happy that it kind of get like properly announced, because it's just something we've known about for a long time without getting a title or anything.
Yeah. I'm definitely excited for it. I do think the model for 007 in the game is so generic young white boy, it almost looks like a create a character. Like, which would actually be an interesting idea if they let you do a create a character Bond. I don't think that's what it is, but it just does look so generic. I don't think it'll really be a problem. You're not going to be looking at his face most of the game, but it did make me laugh.
Yes. I think it's the kind of thing where it's like, if they do a good job with the game, you will then like it. I think the character could have lots of personality, but just in a trailer, the design doesn't stand out. It's kind of like Arthur Morgan in Red Dead Redemption 2 is the classic character I think of in that way. You watch the trailer and like, who the fuck is this dude? Like, he's got nothing going on. And then after you finish Red Dead Redemption 2, you can't think about him without a tear like going down your cheek. It's like, it's my boy, it's Arthur. So we'll see more with that game. That is also, they've said this before, that it is coming for the Switch too. So that's cool. Next up,
Hitman, the World of Assassination trilogy is a launch game on Switch too. So clearly IO has been like read in on all of that in the same way like CD Projekt Red was for Cyberpunk. So yeah, Nintendo is selective with their dev kits, but they did go to some developers clearly to like do some work.
Yeah, and I feel like IO, ever since they went independent, is very hungry to get their games anywhere they can get them, which is smart because that Hitman, it was a slow burn thing with the Hitman trilogy, the modern Hitman trilogy, but it has been very successful in the long run. And I think that's part of the reason why is you can play that game, pick a PC storefront, you can get it, pick a console, you can get it. And it's if you haven't gotten it, you should get it. Hitman it's just one of the best games of the past 15 years is that Hitman trilogy. This is the most interesting announcement for me, at least, from the Sony thing. And their biggest one is the game Marvel Tokone Fighting Souls, which, if you don't know Japanese, you're very confused about the title, but Tokone does just mean fighting souls. It's just the kanji for fight and soul. But this is a Marvel tag fighter, a 4v4 fighter, which is the first time there's ever been a true tag 4v4 style fighter, but not from the people you'd expect. You'd expect that to be from Capcom, the makers of your Marvel fighting games and Marvel vs. Capcom and such. But no, this, in a huge kind of shock to everybody, is an Arc System Works game. And it is a collaboration with both Marvel and Sony. So Sony is like helping publish the game. So it is a Sony quote unquote exclusive, though it is also coming to PCs. It's PlayStation PC. They put a date for 2026. This game looks fucking awesome. It's very clearly made by the Dragon Ball FighterZ people. Arc System Works makes a lot of games. They've got multiple teams. And there's just been a lot of speculation about what have the Dragon Ball FighterZ team been working on since the DLC ended for that game with Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta a long time ago now. And clearly this is what they've been working on. If you watch the trailer, it's got lots of Dragon Ball FighterZ mechanics, which makes sense because Dragon Ball FighterZ pulls a lot of its mechanics from the classic Capcom Marvel team-up Marvel vs. Capcom games. And so this is just it's an interesting scenario because it's a clear successor to the Marvel vs. Capcom series, which Capcom kind of shit the bed with when they made Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, the last one they did, which nobody liked, and kind of killed that franchise until they brought it back with that fighting game collection they did earlier this year. And so it's been just kind of like a big question mark of, this is a historically really important thing in the fighting game community, is the Marvel fighting games, which well predate Marvel vs. Capcom. Remember that they have like the X-Men fighting games that then became Marvel superheroes and all this stuff. There were a lot of those games in the 90s, and it's cool to see that tradition continue, and it's really fascinating to see Arc System Works come to it. One thing they made clear with the trailer, and then they also had a kind of little like development diary thing that they showed with some of like the kind of high level concept of the game, is that the idea, and you can tell from the title with having Tokone in there, is to make it a very Japanese version of Marvel. So like the idea is to have these kind of not trying to just give you, here is your kind of standard version of Iron Man and Spider-Man and stuff, but do the Arc System Works version of it, make them look very different. Iron Man is the one that stands out the most because he's got a very Gundam / Tokusatsu kind of design. He's got like the big Gundam V on his head. Captain America also has a fairly different design. Kamala Khan / Miss Marvel is in there, and she's got a very anime-ified look that looks really good, especially with their stretchy powers. They've got Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom looks fucking awesome. That's a more kind of, they didn't fuck with the design much because you don't want to change anything with Doctor Doom's design. It's perfect the way it is. It's just a nice looking Doctor Doom. Then they also had Star-Lord and they had Storm. Spider-Man is in there. So it's a nice selection. It's nice to see Storm, who's an X-Men character, because that was one of the big things with Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, is that there were no X-Men characters in that, because Marvel was having its whole Fox feud with X-Men at that point. Storm is also just FYI voiced by Sawashiro Miyuki in the trailer. So that's
awesome.
If you're wondering, should I play this with English voices or Japanese voices, that then answers your question. They also do have some of the other actors I know are from the Japanese side are dub actors from the movie. So Nakamura Yuichi, you can clearly hear, is Captain America. He's the dub actor for those movies. And then I looked up because I thought I heard Yamadera Koichi as Star-Lord, and when I looked up who dubbed Star-Lord in the Guardians movies for Japan, it is Yamadera Koichi, so I assume that's him in the trailer. But it's a really awesome looking game. I'm very curious to see, like, as we get more, what the roster's going to look like. If you're doing a 4v4 tag fighter, you need a big fucking roster to support that number of different characters. I'm curious to see how does the 4v4 system work, because there's some crazy shit in that trailer where you've got 8 different characters on screen coming and doing assists. Like, it's fucking insane looking. And again, nobody has ever done a 4v4 tag fighter. That's a brand new idea. So I'm curious how that is all going to work. And I'm also very curious to see what kind of single player content there will be for people like me who like playing these kinds of games like Dragon Ball FighterZ and Street Fighter 6, but is not so good at it that I can do the online stuff infinitely. I hope that there's some good single player stuff to do. But this was a very surprising announcement, but one I thought was very, very cool.
Oh, I'm so excited for this. It's very much in the vein of Dragon Ball FighterZ, where it looks like it will be just as much fun to watch people play as it will be to play yourself, because it is so gorgeous. It looks like, an anime come to life before your eyes. I love the designs of everyone. I love that the roster feels like a Marvel roster, not an MCU roster.
Yes.
You know what I mean, Sean? Other than the presence of Star-Lord, let's be honest, Star-Lord would not be in any of this stuff if it weren't for the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, but he's here, that's fine. Everyone else, though, feels like, that you have Storm and you have, I guess they're making a push for Doctor Doom in the MCU, but they wouldn't necessarily have known that when they started developing this game. And Spider-Man is also in here, looks great. I love the whole roster. I love how they look. I love how different it is from other, Marvel movies and video games that we've had. And just definitely the MCU is falling apart, but the Marvel games division, there's a lot of good stuff going on when they're not canceling the games. So at least over at Sony, there's good stuff coming out.
Yeah, and I'm very excited to hear people try to figure out, so is it Marvel Taken? I'm just excited to see people try to pronounce the title.
How many people do you think will be calling it Marvel Tekken without knowing that it's Tokon?
I think that will be, if only it was like a Tekken-like fighter, that would be even funnier. It obviously has no resemblance to Tekken mechanically. But yes, I think you will get a lot of people being like, can I get Marvel Tekken? I want to get, did you seen that trailer for Marvel Tekken? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? You mean Tokon Fighting Souls? Please, it should have, the little extended accent above the O, because it's a toe cone.
Yes, indeed.
All right, so that was everything from the Sony show that I pulled out. Then we've got the Summer Game Fest. I only have one announcement for the Summer Game Fest because there is very little. And that is Resident Evil Requiem, Resident Evil 9. And they did put the 9 in the Q in the logo. It switches between the Q and the 9. So I think they're not committed to that being on the box, but they did find where to put the fucking 9 in the title. So that
does not work. That's so funny. Like with Resident Evil Village, that was pretty suave because VILL, it just works. But the 9 as a Q, I guess it's kind of like an upside down Q. But then you can't do a fun Red 9 Weum. Just doesn't work. It's not like Fant 4 Stick or something, Yeah,
they had to go for a very specific font for the title when they were swapping the Q and the 9 back and forth at the end of the trailer. They did also have a date for this, which is February 27th, 2026, which is, that not really that far away. That's 6 months or so. So hopefully they hit that, or, anything that says 2026, I'm always like, it might get delayed. Who knows? But February is a good time.
Village had a pretty far off release date announced, and it hit it. So I would not be surprised. But
yeah, and we know this game has been in development for obviously a very long time. It's been a while since Village. The trailer, I think, looks fucking awesome. It shows a new character. I think her name was Grace, who's like an FBI agent, and she's investigating some sort of evil crime thing. It's got like the first 2 minutes of the trailer has a very like Silence of the Lambs feel. With like the FBI investigating some sort of weird case involving some sort of infection, and there's someone murdered in a hotel or whatever. But then the very Resident Evil thing happens in the last minute of the trailer, where you see the bombed out ruins of Raccoon City from the end of Resident Evil 2/3, where Raccoon City gets fucking bombed by the U.S. government. And so apparently some of the game is going to take place in the ruins of Raccoon City. You see a destroyed version of the police department from 2 in there. And that's very interesting to me, because it did not, until they showed the shot of a nuclearly destroyed city, I had always heard this, like, right, I've not played every Resident Evil game. I don't know, like, maybe if in Resident Evil Revelations they get into some of this stuff, but it is kind of crazy that this series has never really unpacked the notion that the U.S. government bombed one of their own major fucking cities, and it's like we never really talk about that, and it's never really come up. So that's like a very cool idea for a setting for a new Resident Evil game to me, is like, let's go see what kind of nuclear horrors have been wrought upon the T-virus or whatever. There's some pretty fucking crazy shit you could do. But yeah, there's like not, a huge amount of information in the trailer. I'm assuming based on the trailer that the game is probably third person. At the very least, it's not 7-8 style like Half-Life. We're always in Ethan's POV, right? Like to the point where you don't even know what Ethan looks like in those games. Here you're seeing this Grace character who I assume you're playing as because of the way the trailer positions her. So I'm guessing it's either third person or maybe a mix or something. But I'm guessing that this is kind of like a new era for Resident Evil, right? If you have kind of like the Ethan games with 7 and 8, I'm guessing that they're kind of like starting like a different phase for the franchise, which is very exciting.
I mean, Sean, I was just thinking about this. Resident Evil 7 was 2017. It's been almost 9 years.
Yes.
And since that game came out, Resident Evil has not fucking missed. Like, it has been one of the most consistent franchises you can bank on. Like, the most they've possibly missed is the Resident Evil 3 remake, but that's still a great game. It's just a game that probably shouldn't have been a full price release. It probably should have been like, but that's true of the original Resident Evil 3 also on PlayStation. So like, yeah, all of those are great. We've had 7, we've had the 2, 3, 4 remakes, we've had Village. Just, this has gone from a series that was in some trouble in the late 2000s, early 2010s to kind of one of the gold standard franchises. I mean, Capcom, this is true of a lot of what Capcom does now. But yeah, I honestly, I have only scrubbed through the trailer for this too, because I'm going to play it. I'm probably going to love it. It's Resident Evil. It's one of my favorite series. I'm so excited.
Yes, there were lots of rumors about this game that Leon would potentially be in it. I'm curious to see if those rumors will be true or not, because it would be interesting. Obviously, like, Chris was not like a huge part of 7 and 8, but he was in those games, particularly 8. So I'm curious if like maybe that's what they decide to do, is have Leon be the equivalent of what Chris Redfield was for Ethan. But yes, like there's lots of stuff they can do. I'm curious to see the story, but I'm also very curious what they do with the gameplay. But I'm just like sort of assuming this is going to be one of the best games of 2026, because that's kind of how Resident Evil has been for years at this point.
Yes.
And yeah, with you, I have 100% confidence this game is going to be amazing. All right, and then that brings us to the thing that I think has just maybe finished, is the Xbox Games Showcase. So one of the things I put on here is that this was like literally while I was like joining the Zoom call for the podcast, I opened up Blue Sky. I was like, oh, I should probably put this on the outline. They have confirmed what has been leaked to high heaven for a long time. They are doing a full remake of Persona 4 called Persona 4 Revival. They announced it will be for Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. I'm curious if that will eventually be for Switch 2 also, but there was no Switch 2 logo there. And this is like very much as all the rumors and leaks indicated. This is what Persona 3 Reload was for Persona 3. They're doing for Persona 4 is a complete ground up graphical remake. I'm assuming probably using Unreal Engine. The trailer, it's like a 1-minute teaser trailer I watched right before I joined the podcast call, but it is just like a quick, hey, here's like that one street in Inaba that you run up and down as Narukami over and over again. Like, you see that in full modern graphical glory. I'll say that I'm interested about this. I'm not as interested as I was with Persona 3 Reload, because I kind of feel like Persona 4 didn't need a big remake, or we already had Persona 4 The Golden, but I'm curious to see what they do with it in terms of like combat design and any other things they add to it, but I'm not like chomping at the bit for a full remake of Persona 4.
I'm I'm not really interested in this, I'm going to be honest. And I love Persona 4. Obviously, it was the gateway drug to all things
Yes.
Persona and Shin Megami Tensei for both of us. But, like, Persona 4 Golden exists. It is on every modern console. It runs in, like, basically 4K. It looks great. It looks modern. Like, there's no need for this in the same way that, like, there kind of was a need for Persona 3 Reload, because you couldn't... It was harder to just take, like, Persona 3 FES and put it on a modern console that way, and it hadn't had a re-release since the PS3, and the only release that was on systems was Persona 3 Portable, so there were things there, and even then, Persona 3 Reload has a lot of good things about it, but it is by no means the definitive version of that game that I think people maybe would have wanted from it. You know, it does not have the female protagonist, it has things like the lack of animated cutscenes, and some of those cut corners, the visuals are nice, but I don't think they have like the same edge that the original Persona 3 did. So, you know, Persona 3 Reload is good, and I'm glad it exists because it is easier to recommend Persona 3 to people who have an Xbox or a PS5 or something. But with Persona 4, you just don't have that problem. Persona 4 Golden is on everything, it runs on everything, it runs great. I don't think it feels particularly dated. Like, yeah, it's smaller, sort of, you know, chibi-fied characters, I guess, but even then, like, yeah, is running up the street with more of an overhead camera or running through the street with more of a third person fixed behind the shoulder camera? You know, it's like, you're talking about, you know, such small changes at that point. We'll see what they do with it. It does also sound like, because some of the leaks were from the English cast, that this is also going to have a complete English dub replacement, which I think once again is too bad considering how good that cast is. And I think we'll maybe put a damper on some of the reception to it over here, which I think also happened with Persona 3. But yeah, we'll see. I just don't... This is not one where I'm like, oh, I'll definitely be pre-ordering this and getting it on day one. I might be fine sticking with Golden, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I'm most curious about it is how do they treat the Golden content? Because that's, for me, like, if anything, Persona 4 has the opposite problem of Persona 3, where, like, in my heart, the original PS2 version is, to me, the, like, definitive version of Persona 4, and the Golden has, like, lots of positive additions and also lots of things I think detract from the overall experience and kind of dilute the tone of that game. And that's one of the things I'm very curious about, like, do they reassess some of that content? Like, will they have, like, the epilogue in Persona 4 The Golden, which is not good? Will that be in here as well? Like, I'm kind of curious from that perspective. But yes, I'm more like intellectually curious about this game, more so than like really excited to actually play it myself and see all that stuff. Maybe I'll play it. Obviously, I feel like it will very much depend on my mood at the time when this comes out, whether or not I decide to play it. But I'm more excited to just kind of read what they do with it than I don't think I feel compelled to have to play a 90-hour Persona 4 game again to see what all the changes are myself.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And, you know, here's a question. What are they going to do about the battle song? Because Persona 4 has already had a re-release with a new battle song, so there's the two versions depending on how you approach the enemy. Persona 3 added Reload added a battle song, but it was adding on to Mass Destruction. So do we just now have 3 battle songs in Persona 4 Revival? I don't know. It's a quandary.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I mean of like Persona 4 The Golden was the thing that kind of standardized what this version of the like Persona 4 re-release is. It's very different than what FES added. And then Persona 5 The Royal made the same exact kinds of additions to Persona 5 that Persona 4 did. Maybe with less of like the tonal shift in that one. But it was the like, here's another character that kind of exists a little bit outside the story, and we've expanded social links with the sort of pseudo-antagonist character. Like all that stuff, they like followed the same blueprint, including here's the additions to the soundtrack and stuff that follow that same blueprint. And so, yeah, like I'm just curious when you're doing a full remake of this game, what do you do with all of that content? Do you include it? Do you expand on it? Do you do something else? It's like that's the thing I'm like intellectually curious about with this game, including do you try to contrive some weird scenario where there is a third battle song and you have all three of them reach up for the truth, time to make history, and whatever new song they make all in one game at one time. You have the third way to enter battle just to hear another song. Who knows? But it is a bit of a question mark for me. And then of course it begs the bigger question of, do they just say, fuck it, let's just do Persona 5 also? And you're like, okay, that game came out on PS4, please stop. You can't. I think they're probably going to do it, but that's madness.
Yes.
When they do.
Oh my god, yeah, because also Persona 4 or Persona 5 Royal is a perfect game that runs on every modern platform and has just versions for it. It has a PS5 version. That's how I played it. It's insanity. We are definitely in Pokemon remake territory where we are so close to the most recent Pokemon game that it's like, what do you mean we're remaking, whatever we're talking about, where it was on this platform already, right? We're going to be there pretty soon with Pokemon, so who the hell knows? But that's Persona. I make Persona 6 if you're going to make a new Persona, please.
Yes. I mean, they did release a statement saying basically, and we're continuing. Let's see. It's like, additionally, we are actively preparing for the future development of the Persona series as a studio. We are working hard to meet the expectations of fans around the world, and our work is progressing well. Please stay tuned for more updates. So they released an update, basically being like, we know that you guys want to know what Persona 6 is. Obviously, Persona 6 is being made by a different team because the traditional Persona team from Persona 3 on, they made Metaphor Rifantasio. And so we know that Persona 6 has been in development. There were like lots of leaks about it at a certain point that now I'm wondering if those are like leaks or if they were just people, you can never tell on the
wish
online.
casting, yeah.
Yes. But
so
they'll have to announce it eventually. It's been a long time since they've started development.
So just before we move on, here's another couple of Xbox announcements that came out. I'm looking through the whole list. Most of what Xbox announced was honestly just giving dates to things we already knew, like the Gears of War remake.
It's the remaster of the Gears of War remake, because that's who they already did Gears of War Ultimate Edition on the Xbox One. Yes. Gears of War Reloaded is a remaster of Gears of War Ultimate Edition that is also putting it on PlayStation, because that is the fucking world that we live in.
Hey, I'm excited for that because I want to play that on my PS5. But anyway, we're good. That stuff. They did announce the new Call of Duty. It is Black Ops 7. We are in full Call of Duty Death Spiral mode, where we're just doing, because I had to do a double take because Black Ops 6 was last year. I will say in that announcement, the Activision producer who announced it had a line that made it sound like Black Ops 7 might be next year, because he said, this is the first time we're staying within the Black Ops series with back-to-back releases, so we're excited to give players a bit more time to enjoy all the live seasons and provide players more of what they want across Black Ops 6 and Warzone before we turn the page to Black Ops 7. So that sounded a little like maybe it's not the normal release pattern, but we'll find out. It probably is, but we'll see.
Like, I think what's happening there is just what they did with this version of Modern Warfare 3, which they kind of stumbled into. We know that was originally supposed to be more of a DLC-esque thing, and then it ended up becoming a full Call of Duty sequel. But that notion of like, let's stick with this Call of Duty sub-brand for an extra year to milk out everything we can and to better integrate it into their like the Warzone and all that shit, because Call of Duty is a different beast than it used to be. And then presumably next year we will get, or the year after next year if Black Ops 7 isn't coming out this fall, which I bet it is, but it might not be if they haven't given a specific date. But I think the next game after this will be Modern Warfare 4, which is what would have originally been probably what they were thinking of as Modern Warfare 3 before they made that DLC thing actually Modern Warfare 3. So Call of Duty is definitely in like a weird place where their kind of 3 studio cycle has kind of broken down, and now they've got 2 flavors of Call of Duty that are headed up by 2 different companies that are supported by like a billion other smaller studios, but then they're also having to build up and support this larger beast of Call of Duty HQ, which is now the home where all the Call of Duty lives, including Warzone. And so it's like we have to make new boxed games with new campaigns and all that shit, but also support a like live service game at the same time. There's like 2 live service games at the same time. Activision has found themselves in a weird place, and I think that's what this Black Ops 7 or whatever is telling us, is like they are just trying to figure out a different version of the Call of Duty cycle, because the old version fell apart at some point.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens there. Then there was, this is an interesting one that I just wanted to mention, that we are getting our first sort of Xbox handheld device, but this is probably not their longer term thing they are working on, because what it is it is just an Xbox branded ROG Ally. It is going to be called the ROG Xbox Ally. There will also be an ROG Xbox Ally X that has a little more horsepower and storage, because we've got to keep up our confusing... I know, so many X's, as always with Xbox. But yeah, it is, if you've seen an ROG Xbox or an ROG Ally, it is that, but with an Xbox button on it, so you can use basically the Xbox PC launcher on it, and it'll have that app. But, you know, if you already have an ROG Ally, I assume you can put all that on there. This is just one that is basically branded for Xbox. That is coming this fall. The one big news that people will be excited about is they did mention Hollow Knight Silk Song's release date finally, and that will be alongside the ROG Xbox Ally. But really, I do have to say, Sean, the biggest news out of the Xbox showcase is that they did show a little bit more of the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 and 4 remake, and it is going to have Michelangelo from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles shredding on a skateboard, and that's pretty exciting.
Okay, I did see, I saw that they had some trailer or something for it, but I didn't see any more of that. I'm just so wait. They need to put Spider-Man back in. Spider-Man was that 2, the original version of 2, I think, at Spider-Man.
Yeah, so it's the original 2,
and the original 1 had Darth Maul. You know, they used to have even better guest characters, but I'll take Michelangelo. I mean, he canonically skateboards, unlike Darth Maul and Spider-Man, who canonically don't skateboard. But you know, Michelangelo, he fucking shreds while he, you know, munches on some pizza. I'll take that. I don't know what his 3 brothers are doing. Like, can they not join also? I hope that you know, Leonardo and Donatello and Raphael show up at some point. But that is a very exciting announcement.
It is. They've already announced Doom Slayer from Doom is also going to be in there as a guest character. So that's a cool... They are going back to doing some guest characters. Bam Margera is coming back. They also showed that off. So, you know, if you're into the skating stuff, this looks... I mean, I'm excited for this game because I loved the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 remaster. 3 and 4 looks great. And that one is coming to Switch too, so that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So that's the gaming news. Anything else from this section to go over, Sean?
No, I mean, just like a little bit on the ROG... or ROG, the Republic of Gamers, Xbox Ally. For people who don't know what ROG/ROG is, it is the Republic of Gamers, the most embarrassingly named brand in the history of brands. It is interesting to me, like, this kind of weird won't they path that Xbox is having, where it's like, I'm curious to see if, because as far as I can tell, without having the time to like sit and actually sort through all this information, it does not seem to me like they have announced anything specific about like changes to Windows as a front end for these kinds of handheld PCs, because we know that that's like one of the big things that they need to solve, that they've kind of indicated they need to solve, that Phil Spencer has talked about this, that like the big success story in the PC handheld space is the Steam Deck. Like, by and large, of those versions of handhelds, the PC handheld Steam Deck is the best selling one, and it's also, if you hear people talk about these, obviously neither of us own any of these devices, but anyone talking about them sings the praises of the Steam Deck, and then, like, if you're a freak, you can get your ROG Ally or whatever, and if you're like, if you're going that far, sure, you can get these other devices. But also, if you're getting one of those, you should download whatever I don't remember what it's called, but whatever the software is that basically allows you to use SteamOS with those, their kind of modified version of Linux, because that's just so much better at running games. And Windows is just a very kind of bloated operating system at this point, that if you've got a high-powered PC, you can deal with that fine. If you're a very power-limited device, though, all that bloat is just going to kill it. And that's the thing that everybody who's played these handheld PCs I've heard to talk about, including I've had some students that have had some of these that I've talked about with, like, it's just like, that is not a tenable scenario. And so I'm curious, at what phase of of Microsoft's plan are we, right? Are we going to get a bespoke Xbox One that is not just an Xbox branded device, which is what this clearly is? Are we going to get something that is using an Xbox operating system at a certain point that's like what your next gen Xbox is? Instead, is it going to be we're making a modified gamers version of Windows? But this is clearly a kind of like stopgap device. Like, we are not at like whatever their real strategy is for the handheld PC market, the PC market in general, or for Xbox. Like, this is like some sort of like middle device that is there to fill in that gap while they're working on whatever their actual long-term strategy for Xbox is, now that Xbox is not what it has previously been as a kind of platform.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a bigger conversation to have at some point, that Windows 11 is a disaster at this point, and it is having serious problems for the entire PC gaming market. I've heard a lot about this from my brother, who does play PC games, and he has a very powerful PC, and even he runs into problems with, like, the bloat of Windows 11 is just holding a lot of stuff back, and obviously in the handheld space that becomes a big problem. I mean, just look at the amount of RAM they're having to throw at this to get it working. The fucking ROG Ally is 16 gigs of RAM, and then the Ally X is 24. That's just a ridiculous amount for, like, gaming, that gaming does not usually need that crazy amount.
Especially if you're going to be running this at presumably lower resolutions and stuff.
Yes. Yeah, it's just like you're having to throw a lot at it to get Windows 11 to behave in this scenario. And the reason the Steam Deck works so well is because it's got that Linux operating system. It runs a translation layer on the games, and it is able to run pretty lightweight, which is what you need. Like, this is part of the magic sauce of the Nintendo Switch, is that the Switch, like Nintendo's OS, is a very lightweight layer on that thing, and it's never had like bloat or slowdown because of that. So and it gives games actual like room to run around the edges, not to have to manage the OS. So definitely interesting, and we'll see, like, again, as you just said, Sean, this is a stopgap until they figure out what they're doing with handhelds later on, but this is like clearly part of their, everything is an Xbox campaign to get something else out there.
Yes, and these are both, they're putting it on the box. These are definitively Xboxes. They are is Xbox Ally and Xbox Ally X. So they're putting out 2 new Xboxes to complement their existing Xboxes.
They're existing Xboxes that are the most expensive gaming hardware you can buy.
Yes.
Anyway, you want to move into some new gaming hardware, Sean, and talk about the Nintendo Switch 2?
Yes, Jonathan. So you've paid the money, you've paid the man his money, and you got your fancy new video game thing. The Nintendo Switch 2. Like, I'll say, like, first, obviously I had not gotten one. It has been a little bit weird from my end as someone not getting one, that they're, Nintendo did not send out like review units and stuff like that. So it's been kind of like it's not felt like a new console has launched from like an outsider's perspective, because there's not been a lot of like content for me to like read. So I feel like there's a lot I don't really know, because there hasn't been a lot out there. So I'm actually pretty curious to hear your impressions, just because like I have not seen much about what the Nintendo Switch 2 experience has been, because there was no like pre-release interviews or anything kind of that stuff that I'd normally read for a big console launch like this.
You're totally right, and it meant that the launch for me was pretty exciting, because I felt like there was a lot for me to like discover and figure out, and I kind of enjoyed that. But it also means, Sean, like, yeah, definitely ask questions if you've got them, because I've spent a lot of time with this, trying to figure out, get my head around the Nintendo Switch 2. So I've had it for basically 3 days. It launched on Thursday. Mine came in on Friday. We're recording this on Sunday. So I played it some Friday night, all day Saturday, and a little bit this morning. And I've played a lot of different things on it to try to get a good sense of it for today. And kind of my opening thesis with the Switch 2 is that I think the existential question of the Switch brand was always whether it is a home console that you can then take with you on the go, or a portable console that you can hook up to your TV. And I know that sounds like a subtle distinction, but I do think it's meaningful about, like, where does Nintendo put the emphasis? And my contention with the original Switch was always that it was the latter. It was a portable console that you could hook up to your TV, but that the Switch, in its heart of hearts, was a portable system, was the successor to the, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, 3DS line, but it could also do home console stuff. And I think the big revelation of the Switch 2 for me is that, while this is an incremental console in so much as it is the Switch 2, it is not an all-new device, I do think there's a pretty notable shift in emphasis with this machine. It does feel much more to me like a home console that you can take with you, rather than a portable console that you can put on your TV. And there's a lot of ways that manifests. And the first way that manifests is when you get it out of the box and you hold it in your hands. The Switch 2 is big. Like, it's not big in the way probably like a Steam Deck or an ROG Ally is. Those things are fucking beasts, right? They're portable with an asterisk around it, right? Those things are huge. But, like, it is definitely quite a bit bigger than the Switch 1. It is the same thickness, so it's still, a very thin device. But it just fills out the hands a lot more. The screen is at this point, I think, 7.9 inches. So it's gotten quite a bit bigger from the previous versions of the Switch. Even if you had the Switch OLED, this is quite a bit bigger. It is taller in addition to being wider. So the Joy-Cons, in the hand feel great. They're much bigger than the original Joy-Cons. But as you hold it as a portable device, like my immediate impression, and this still hasn't totally shaken for me, is that if you're viewing this primarily as a portable device, so far, I think it is a less comfortable machine than the Switch 1. I think the Switch 1 always felt really great in my hands. I loved, playing it that way. I loved kind of curling up with it on the couch or on my bed or something and playing the Switch 1, and it just always felt like I had a very natural grip on it. But like the first thing I realized is that my grip style for the Switch 1 doesn't work on the Switch 2, which is that the way I held the Switch 1 was always, hands wrapped around it, but with my pinkies on the bottom of the Switch, and that's where I kind of let the weight of it rest. You really can't, or at least my hands can't do that on the Switch 2 because it's a little too heavy, the pinkies get fatigued, and it's a little too wide for that to feel right. So I'm having to develop more of a grip style of all four fingers sort of, or the three fingers that are not my like index and thumb, kind of resting on the back and just finding a way to support its weight. But the fact that it is bigger, wider, heavier, you definitely feel. And that doesn't make it a bad portable machine. It is still a very good portable machine that has a really good, screen, and it is not, it is not heavy for what it is. It is just heavier than the Switch 1. But like I will say, one question I immediately had is, will kids be able to hold this thing? Like, that is a genuine question I have, is like, this feels too big for children because I have big hands and I'm trying to figure out how to hold it. Now, maybe that's a silly question because, of course, there's a lot of children now who use fucking giant iPads from the time they are born and they just don't mind it, and who knows. But, like, that was my initial reaction, at least. But, you plug the thing in, and the dock is obviously much bigger now, too, because it has fans built in. The dock has all the bells and whistles. It's got the, LAN port and multiple USB-C ports and all that stuff. That some of that was exclusive to the OLED model in the past. And you put it on your TV, and, this is a modern 4K device. It's got 4K output, it's got HDR output, it's got 120 hertz output, although there's not a lot of software, if any, that supports that yet. But, of course, it is just launched 3 days ago. So it's got all of that. This is the first Nintendo machine I've ever gone and like done the thing where I'm like checking the output information, and it has a similar screen as the PlayStation of like, tell me what the HDMI cord I have plugged in can support, all of that stuff. And yeah, it is a really impressive piece of technology. Like when you start running either the new native games or the games that they've updated to work with it, like, I definitely had a moment where I was playing Breath of the Wild, the Zelda game, which has a new Nintendo Switch 2 edition, so native Nintendo Switch 2 update. And I was showing it to my brother, who's a big Zelda fan, and we both kind of looked at each other and were like, it's hard to believe this is Nintendo. Like, it looks so good. It is such a good graphical upgrade. You are playing a Nintendo game in basically native 4K, 60 FPS with HDR. It is an older game that has been remastered, granted, but this also goes for, like, Mario Kart World and some of the other new stuff. And it is really crazy impressive to see that up there on your TV, and it just, like, everything I've thrown at this looks great. And I'll talk about some of the individual games in a bit. They also look great on the screen on the device. The handheld screen is really impressive. Obviously, there are some things the old OLED screen will do better because it is OLED, and this is an LCD screen. But as LCD screens go, this is about as good as it gets. It is a big 1080p screen. You immediately notice that resolution boost just on things like text. The color accuracy is really good. It is a screen that can support HDR, and it is, probably not as obvious as HDR if you have like a fancy 4K TV, but you do notice it. Like, one of the first things I did was go into Zelda Breath of the Wild and just start a fire, because that's the kind of thing that you will see HDR on, and you can definitely tell that like that effect is there and it is vivid. That actually helps kind of make up for the lack of OLED, because standard SDR content on an OLED kind of looks like HDR on an LCD. If you've ever noticed that, Sean, like if you watch a Blu-ray on an OLED, it looks kind of HDR, even if it doesn't have it, because OLEDs are lit by the pixel, so they have actual luminance, right? And so you still get that feeling that you got from the OLED Switch on the LCD Switch 2 if it supports HDR and has that content. So that's kind of cool. But no, it's a really good looking screen. Like I said, very color accurate. You do notice that like blacks are not real blacks in the way an OLED is, but that's inevitable. And it is a screen with a lot of updates other than the OLED thing, right? It can go to 120 hertz, it has HDR, it is 1080p, it is bigger, it is quite a bit brighter. That's another thing I noticed. Now that makes sense because it is an HDR display, but it feels like it's like if you go to max, I would like estimate it's like probably double the brightness of the Switch 1. Like it's a much, much brighter display. I have not ever so far had to go to max brightness, and I would frequently play at max brightness on my Switch OLED. So it is definitely a much, much brighter display. So all of that. So like, yeah, technically it is a really impressive machine. I will also say Nintendo has done a lot of work with their account system and digital downloads, and now they've introduced this virtual game card system. This is the smoothest process with a new Nintendo machine I have ever had, and it is one of the smoothest processes with a new gaming machine I have ever had. Like signing in, you bring it up and it just has a QR code, so you can bring out your phone and it just logs you in. You don't even have to enter anything if you're already signed in on your phone. It's got all of that. You start, playing. The virtual game card thing, I think, is awesome. It is something I think other developers like Sony and Xbox would really benefit adopting a system like this because it is very intuitive. And I did not even set up my Switch 2. I didn't do a transfer from Switch 1. You can do that. But I decided, because there's some stuff I still might be using my Switch 1 for, I decided I'll just set it up as a new device, and if I want to play a game that's on my Switch 1, I can just either take the game card that I already have and put it in, and there's no problem there, or use the virtual game card thing, and I have run into no problems with that at all. It's very smooth, very easy. If you have Switch Online, the Save Cloud system is really, really good. I would say it's actually very comparable to what Xbox has, where it is pretty seamless. If you just are launching a game that you had something save data in the cloud, it just prompts you, hey, do you want to download your save data? And then you're off to the races, and I've had no issues whatsoever with any of that. So very smooth, very easy. I remember when I got the Wii U, the last time Nintendo did one of these iterative upgrades, moving from the Wii to the Wii U was a nightmare that took like most of my first day with the Wii U. Moving from the DS to the 3DS or the 3DS to like the 3DS XL could also be quite a task, or even like my Switch to my Switch OLED. I remember there was a lot of hassle, and there was just none of that. They've really smoothed out that process. The technical element of it is really good, where like this just feels like very much a system on par with like its technical processes, its internet processes, all of that stuff with like Sony PS5. Like obviously I'm not saying it has the graphical horsepower of the PS5, but it feels mature in that way, in a way that you didn't necessarily expect of Nintendo 5-10 years ago. And that's been really cool.
It just sounds like it's a modern device that does the things you expect modern devices to do, which it's just not been the case for Nintendo. Nintendo was just so far behind the curve on like online features, account stuff, friends lists, chat, like all of those kinds of like the whole like Xbox Live generation with Xbox 360 that Xbox obviously was by far and is still the best at those kinds of service things. Sony had like a little bit of catch up to do, but like, has been in a pretty good place with that for a while. And then Nintendo was just like I could never figure out how to fucking play a game online with my original Wii. Like I never got it to really work. They just have been like all over the place with that stuff. And it sounds like they finally like created a modern device that, like you say, like you can sign into your account on your phone, and here's a QR code, and you scan the QR code, and it's like, yes, because that's how it should be, because that's like what every modern appliance does, because you don't have to type in shit on like an on-screen keyboard. Like nobody should have to do that anymore. We've all got phones, and so things have moved on from that era, and it's nice to hear that Nintendo is now like on an even playing field with everybody else in that respect.
Honestly, it's on a better playing field in some respects. I do think that virtual game card system is a one-up on some of the competition. I think its save management is significantly better than Sony. I've had some real problems with save management on Sony, especially when I have not had PS Plus, because there is no good way to transfer saves from one PlayStation 5 to another if you do not have online paid access. Even with like Switch, you can do the save cloud thing, but also like it's super easy without even, you can just do it over Wi-Fi, transfer your saves. It's very, very easy. So all of that is really impressive as well. So I just wanted to shout that out. It's cool. Then in terms of software, it also, clearly here's where they've taken a cue from Sony. It does very clearly show you what kind of software you're running. So if like Mario Kart World is a native new Switch 2 game, and if you go into, basically you press the start button, plus button on the app, it'll show you and it says this is Switch 2 software. If you're running like an old Switch 1 game, like Super Mario Odyssey, it'll tell you this is Switch 1 software. And then, of course, there are games that have been updated to have Switch 2 editions, like Breath of the Wild, and that becomes a Switch 2 edition. That whole process of, like, I put in my cartridge for Breath of the Wild, it started updating it, and then I just went into the eShop and got the upgrade, and it recognized all of that. Here's something that I thought was actually kind of interesting, is that if you get Breath of the Wild from the eShop as a Switch 2 edition, it is a 22 gigabyte game. If you have the Switch 1 cartridge, it still uses some of that data. So it doesn't just download a completely new set of code for the Switch 2 edition. It downloaded about 11 gigabytes, but then it is still using some of the data from your Switch 1 cartridge. So it's like if, for instance, on PlayStation, if you have a PS4 upgrade, it doesn't read anything from the PS4 disc. It just downloads the PS5 version of the game, and you have to put in the PS4 disc. It's a different kind of thing. But,
because you're not running a game off of a disc anyway. In the way that you're running a game off of a cartridge with the Switch, so it's like it's a different system. But yes, that's interesting that it's not just downloading the digital version and just using the cartridge as a key, which is obviously what the Xbox or a PlayStation would do. But it makes sense that because you're actually running data off of cartridges anyways, that they would be able to do that. But that's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, again, it makes more sense here than on Sony, but I'm just saying someone had to go in and figure out, what data are we downloading versus this. It would have been easier to just give you a whole packet of download it, and they didn't do that, so I think that's cool. So again, all of that has been easy. I also want to shout out, Switch Online is just fucking stunting on the competition at this point. For $50 a year, you get all of the Switch Online apps, which is NES, Super NES, Genesis, Game Boy Advance, N64, and now on Switch 2 GameCube. You get all of that. You get Save Data Cloud. You get, obviously, online play, which is the basic thing. And you get all of that, and now they're throwing in, you get DLC for various games, and all of the Switch 2 edition upgrades are free. So, I did not have to pay $10 for the Breath of the Wild upgrade. It's free because I have Switch Online. Even at the most expensive, PS Plus tier, you're not getting that kind of stuff. So, and at the most expensive PS Plus tier is where you get the classic games, and there's not nearly as many of them as there are on Nintendo. So I just want to say, Nintendo for that $50 a year price point, or $20 if you don't want some of the extra bells and whistles, they're giving you a lot with that. And it's very obvious when you start playing the Switch 2, because right off the get-go, you're getting some of these free things. So you have the Switch 2 editions. You also have Switch 1 games that have had patches for Switch 2, sort of like, God of War, I remember, on PlayStation 5, did not get a PS5 version, but it got a patch where when played on PS5, it unlocked 60 FPS and stuff like that. So you've got that for a bunch of games. And then there's various Switch 1 games I've tried that don't have any Switch 2 patches, but do still have obvious improvements just from running on the new hardware. So yeah, I've had a lot to play and test, and I've enjoyed my time with it quite a bit. I've played a lot in handheld mode. I've played a lot on my TV. I've played a lot with the Joy-Con 2s. You can use all of your old Switch accessories, so I've played with my Switch 1 Pro controller as well, and hooked that up. That was very easy. But yeah, I have a lot of places I could go with this, Sean. Is there anything in particular you're interested in before I get into some other stuff?
I guess I've got a few questions about some stuff. Have you what's the battery life like? I know you haven't had it for very long, so I don't know what you've noticed there, but how is that comparing to the Switch 1?
I really don't have a good answer for that yet, because my first day I was doing a lot of incredibly battery intensive things like downloading a bunch of games, and that chewed through the battery, but that will chew through your battery on any device. So I have not had a great sense of it so far. It feels like I have not run it to zero yet. But I've been charging it and putting it in and out of the dock and all that. From the times where I've just played handheld, it looks to me like it is draining faster than my Switch 1 OLED. Now, do remember that the Switch 1 OLED and subsequent revisions of the Switch 1 had better battery life than the launch version of the Switch 1. So this does not feel better or worse necessarily than that old launch version of the Switch 1, but compared to later revisions, it feels like it is chewing through it faster, but it also looks like the Switch 2, it is more dependent on what game you're playing. The Switch 1, it didn't quite matter what software you were running. The battery was pretty consistent. It does feel like the Switch 2 responds more to what you are running. Like, for instance, I had a session session yesterday where I was playing a lot of Mario Kart World and then some of the Bravely Default HD remaster, and it felt like, and again, this is not scientific, but it felt to me like Bravely Default was chewing through that less fast than Mario Kart World, which makes sense because Mario Kart World is a way more graphically intensive game and runs the fans faster, for instance.
Okay, so it seems like it's like maybe sort of on par with the launch version of the Switch 1, but with like some variants.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, and that is what they've said. Like, their stated time, I think, is 2 to 6 hours. And that's, if I remember correctly, that is what the Switch 1 at launch was basically like. So, yeah.
I guess the other question I have is with the memory stuff. So I know that you can't use your standard micro SD cards, right? You need a micro SD Express. Like, what are you doing with memory, and how has that situation been?
Yeah, so I have not gotten any expandable storage or anything yet. It has 256 gigs built in, and you have access to most of that. Like, again, the Switch OS is so low-key that this is not like your PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series where you have technically a terabyte, but you really have like 700 gigs or something, whatever that is, right? So you do have most of it. And I have not come anywhere close to filling it. Obviously, one of the benefits to Switch games still, and I know there's the asterisk with the game key cards, we can talk about that later, but a lot of games, if you have the cartridge, the data is there. So a lot of like my old games I've tested, I haven't had to install more than a few hundred megabytes. I think for the like relative size of Switch and Switch 2 software, 256 gigs is pretty good to get you started. Like, eventually I will need more. If I were trying to immediately port over my entire Switch 1 collection, I would need way more. But I've had my Switch 1 for 8 years, and I currently have a 1 terabyte SD card in there. So, that would be a crazy amount to port over. But for now, right now, Sean, you can see the list of games I have installed. I've put it on the outline, Sean. I still have 150 gigs on that system. So I'm doing totally fine on storage so far. I have not had to worry about it.
Yeah, do you know, what's the... Well, I guess because there just aren't that many Switch 2 games. Because I was just trying to think of, what is, what are you looking at in terms of the file sizes for those? Because I'm curious what, Cyberpunk 2077, how big is that on the Switch if you download it?
Yeah, the Cyberpunk 2077, I believe, is 60 gigs because it does fit on a cart, and the carts max out at the moment at 64 gigs. But here, I'm bringing up my Switch 2 right now, and I will go into data and look at this for you. I think Mario Kart World is in the range of 20 gigabytes. That seems to be pretty standard for Switch 2 software so far. Yeah, okay. The biggest thing I have on here is Mario Kart World. That is 21.9. Tears of the Kingdom I have just purely as a digital game. There's no cart, so that is 20.1 gigabytes for the Switch 2 version. I believe that was 13 or 14 on Switch 1, so bigger but not hugely bigger. And then Bravely Default is a Switch 2 game, although it is a redo of a 3DS game. That is 9 gigabytes. GameCube. This is one that's going to be interesting to watch going forward. The GameCube Classics app only has 3 games and is already 5 gigabytes, so I assume that is going to balloon.
That makes
Although
sense.
I would imagine they'll have to give you some option to pick and choose which GameCube games you put on there at some point. But for now, they haven't had to have that problem yet. So yeah, that's basically what I have so far.
I guess the bigger question mark is Switch 2 third-party games. I'm just thinking if you're getting Hitman or Cyberpunk, you're getting and then eventually, presumably, Call of Duty, Microsoft will port that over. I'm just curious, what they will do with those kinds of file sizes, where for PlayStation, Xbox, some of those games, like a Call of Duty, can be in excess of 150 gigabytes, when you have a Call of Duty HQ and Warzone and all that stuff that's trying to download. I'm just curious, because, on paper, this is sort of in your, PS4-ish tier in terms of, what you would be expecting in terms of resolution, texture sizes, stuff like that. And we saw, that's when you saw these kinds of insane giant file sizes with games was on that PS4 generation. So I'm kind of curious where it goes in that respect, or if they find ways to try to mitigate that because it is a portable device.
Yeah. So far, they've done a pretty good job. Cyberpunk, and again, CD Projekt Red is better and more conscientious about this than a lot of other developers, but it is a 60 gig download, and that is a 100 gigabyte game on PS5, or even probably on the PS4 if you decided to play it there for some reason. I guess that version isn't as broken as it once was, but it did not run well. So that is quite a big condensation that they've done, or compression. Hitman World of Assassination, I think, is 58 gigabytes, and that is definitely over 100 on PS5.
Yes.
So they've definitely done a good job getting that down. And so that's pretty in line with how third-party games were on Switch 1. Like, Doom is big on Switch 1. It's like a 30 gigabyte game, but it's not as big as it is on PlayStation, where it's like a 60 gigabyte game. One thing, though, is the storage is more generous. Like, The Witcher 3, let's say, is a good example compared to Cyberpunk, because they're both CD Projekt. I don't believe you could download Witcher 3 on the original Switch with its 32 gigabyte internal storage. You had to have an SD card. Cyberpunk, you can, on day one, download the whole thing and have plenty of room left over. So they definitely have mitigated that situation compared to the Switch 1, I think, in a pretty big way.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. So that's some of that stuff. Let's talk about some of the backwards compatibility updates, because I think this stuff is fascinating. So I think the most obvious headliners for this are Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom, because those have had full paid upgrades to Switch 2 editions, a la, like Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut on PS5 or something like that. And these now run at native 1080p handheld, native 4K on your TV. They run at full 60 frames per second. They have HDR, all of those bells and whistles. They're using the updated rumble features of the new Joy-Cons, which is definitely, that's a thing that I definitely noticed right out of the box. They feel very much in line with Sony's rumble features in the DualSense, like very powerful but also precise, haptic feedback. But anyway, you've got those, and I've actually put a lot of time into Breath of the Wild already. I just started a new file and started playing and kind of lost myself in it, because it is a stunning upgrade. Even if you compare it to some of the emulated versions of Breath of the Wild people did back in the day from the Wii U version, this is better. This is really, really good. It looks stunning. The use of HDR is restrained because this game wasn't originally, made for it, but it is very noticeable. Like when, the sun breaks over a mountain, or you have an explosion and fire goes everywhere, the HDR is really powerful and beautiful. The colors are very deep and rich. And basically every possible technical and graphical problem that you experience with Breath of the Wild on Switch 1 is just completely gone. There are no frame rate slowdowns, even if you go to the Korok Forest. There are no resolution issues whatsoever. There's none of those jagged edges. There's some low resolution textures, because that's just what the game is. But they still, there's a lot of textures that look really good. You know how much foliage there is in Breath of the Wild. None of it is popping in anymore. It looks absolutely stunning. You can just see so much detail. There's no fuzziness anywhere. And I have not played as much of Tears of the Kingdom, but I did load into an old save on that just to run around and check. And that is equally flawless. Obviously, those games are built on the same fundamental tech, so that's a similar upgrade. But yes, these are very definitive versions of those games, and they're gorgeous. But I was honestly just as impressed with some of the patches that you got for Switch 1 games. So these are not upgrading these to be native Switch 2 software, but they're still really impressive. So Super Mario Odyssey already ran great on Switch 1. It was a 60 FPS game, looked awesome. It was native 720p, 1080p, but now it is native 1080p 4K. It has HDR. I don't think Odyssey had any noticeable frame rate dips, but if it did, those are clearly gone, and it just looks and runs really good. I brought that up on my 4K TV and was kind of blown away by how good that looked. Other Mario games got upgrades. New Super Mario Bros. U, the Wii U port, got one. Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury got one. Both of those look fantastic as well. Just very, very sharp and detailed, and again, because they're pushed up to the native resolution of the handheld screen of your TV. They look awesome. Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. And then these are ones that I'm going to be excited to get into at some point. The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening and Echoes of Wisdom got these upgrades, and I haven't spent a lot of time with those, but I will say the resolution boost is immediately noticeable, and both of those games had pretty significant frame rate issues, and I imagine those are completely gone. I never finished Echoes of Wisdom, so I will definitely have to go back to it and finish it there, because that's a very impressive upgrade. And all of those are completely free. Those are just patches that the games have. But even if you go to some unpatched Switch 1 games, those can be pretty impressive as well. I tried two of the more demanding console ports I own, which is Doom 2016 and The Witcher 3, and both of those, they have not had any resolution boosts,
right,
but the dynamic resolution thing isn't kicking in. So it is a stable, whatever their, peak resolution was, you just have. And then there's no frame rate issues to notice anymore. Now those are both, they're 30, but they are a locked 30. You have no issues with that anymore. And I would imagine with pretty simple patches, you could get those running at 60 or above now, higher resolutions, all of that stuff. Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, that port came out earlier this year, and it's a really good remaster, but it had two issues. It had some frame rate dips that were unfortunate, like not game breaking or anything, but just noticeable because that's a very like fluid game. And then it had really weirdly long loading times, like longer than the original Wii version that ran on a fucking DVD disc, which was just weird. And I did boot that up on my Switch 2, and immediately those load times are like hilariously shortened, like now much shorter than they were on Wii. So like I would say less than half of what they were on the Switch 1, and the frame rate issues are gone. So that's impressive. The one thing that I would say holds back Switch 1 backwards compatibility on the Switch 2 is if you're playing handheld. The problem with unpatched games is a resolution issue. So the Switch 1 had a 720p screen for its handheld, and the Switch 2 has a 1080p screen. If you're playing an unpatched game, I'll use the example of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, because I've been playing that one lately on my Switch 1, and so I started playing it on my Switch 2 a little bit. And if you're playing docked, totally fine. It is exactly as it would have been docked on your Switch 1, no difference whatsoever. If anything, it'll be faster and all of that stuff, right? But if you're playing handheld, now it is taking 720p and upscaling it to 1080p, and whatever upscaling solution they're using is not very good. It doesn't ruin the game, but it looks noticeably jagged. It looks like an image that has been stretched up to 1080p, and so like it is just fuzzier. Like if I put it next to playing that game on my Switch OLED, it looks better on the Switch OLED, and not just because of the OLED of it all, but because of it is a native pixel count, and it just looks totally fine there. And on the Switch 2, it looks blown up uncomfortably. Mm-hmm. I would compare it a little bit to DS software on the 3DS. Now, that was much worse if you remember that on the original 3DS. Like, DS software looked awful on that because of how they did the resolution scaling. This is not awful. It is perfectly playable, and it is still colorful and all of that, and the frame rate's fine. There's no, issues at all. But it is like the resolution scale is subpar. There is an easy way they could fix this, which would be allow you to play the game in its docked mode while handheld.
Right.
So for Tropical Freeze, for instance, that is a native 1080p docked. The Switch 2 could obviously run that handheld. It would just need something to like trigger that in the system's OS to say, put out like you are putting out to a TV. And I wish there was some system level switch you could flip that would do that. I would imagine for Nintendo first-party games that patches will be coming for all of these, because it would be trivially easy to patch Tropical Freeze and tell it, hey, run in 1080p on handheld. That game can already run 1080p. You're not telling it to do anything it can't already do. But I do worry about some like third-party games or indie games that aren't going to get those patches, and that is where I think some system-level solution would be nice to have. And that is the one scenario for which I am still keeping my Switch 1 around for now, which is that if you're playing a game like Tropical Freeze handheld, it's going to look a lot better on your Switch 1 than on your Switch 2.
Yeah, it does seem like it'd be nice to have like the equivalent of like what Sony did with the PS4 Pro or the PS5 Pro, where you have your like boost mode option or whatever you can go into, or like the PS5 Pro also has the like use machine learning upscaling on PS4 game stuff. Something like that that they can sort of like wash their hands of like, hey, if it fucks something up, it fucks something up. Like, I don't know, we're not going to test every single Switch 1 game with this shit, but if you want to turn it on, here you go. Like, that would be nice.
Yeah. And I haven't run into any Switch 1 games that I own that don't work on the Switch 2. I know there is a small number. For instance, I saw in the store that Nier Automata, that port is not currently working on Switch 2, but that is a Square Enix game. I assume that'll get fixed. Square Enix is a very consistent partner of Nintendo, and I assume they'll fix any of those issues.
Or they'll just take this as an opportunity to release another version of Nier Automata, which they're not shy to do.
Yes.
Just be like, fuck it, yeah, great. Let's go. Let's sell this game again, and can we have 2B show up in any of your games? Like, she'll go up in anything. I don't care. Let's go. Give us this money.
Well, Nier Automata had a really good Switch 1 port that was actually better in quite a few respects than the original PS4 version. Like, it ran at a more consistent frame rate and resolution. So if you could just get that and then, like, open the frame rate to 60 and bump the resolution a little bit, you could have a really great Switch 2 port of Nier Automata right out the box. So anyway, that's all really cool. The biggest improvement I've seen to any game is Pokemon Scarlet and Violet.
Oh, yeah.
That game does have a patch for Switch 2, so it's free, and it is still running as a Switch 1 game, but it is now native 1080p on your handheld system. It looks like native 4K on the TV to me. I can't do the pixel count, but it looks like that to me. And it is running at full 60 FPS. And boy, what a redemption for that game, because it is just like immediately it looks like a different fucking game, because it is like so smooth. There are no jagged edges on anything anymore. It is full 60 FPS, so there's no, and let's be honest, Pokemon Violet wasn't even 30 FPS. That was like a 15 to 25 FPS game on the Nintendo Switch 1. And so all of that is fixed. The load times are way better. Violet had some pretty bad load times if you were fast traveling or even just getting into battles. All of that is gone now. There are some other visual quirks of that game that you can't fix through a simple resolution boost. But like overall, if you were holding off on playing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and you now own a Switch 2, I think you will be more than happy. Like, those games look totally fine now, and I was pretty blown away, particularly putting that on my TV, because Pokemon Violet, I played that whole game. I am a fan of Pokemon Violet. I am a defender of Pokemon Violet. I am a person who never played Pokemon Violet on my TV, because every time I put it there, it made me sad, and in handheld mode, it was acceptable. Not great, but acceptable. Now I could imagine actually playing Pokemon Violet on my 4K TV. What a world, Sean. What a world.
Because the Pokemon Scarlet/Violet is the one where when I watched some videos of it, I was like, this might be one of the ugliest games I've ever seen. Like, it just, oh my God. So yes, that's good, because man, that that fucking game. Somebody didn't play it, but watched this video of it. I'm like that was where I couldn't watch VTubers playing it. Like if I was watching like a compilation video, it's like, oh, who's Subaru playing Pokemon Violet or whatever. Like I can't fucking look like this game, man. Jesus Christ.
Especially when you take Pokemon Violet and you like apply YouTube streaming compression, right? Like, yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. So that's really nice. Yeah, and that's also like, Breath of the Wild was like a nice looking game because it had really great art style. But I also remember that game being one that when I played it, I just distinctly remember feeling like, man, this game is held back by the platform that it's on, because it just had such a jagged look to it. It looked so rough. Like the art is so good, but the presentation of that art was so poor. I felt like in that game, and Tears of the Kingdom, I bought a copy and then just played emulated, and so that circumvented some of that stuff. But Breath of the Wild was one that, like, I'm not even a big fan of that game, but it was just one that I remember feeling, and I played the Wii U because I borrowed your Wii U to play that game.
Yeah.
But I just remember feeling like, man, this game is not sort of what this game is trying to do visually is not being held up by the hardware that's running it, and so it's nice that those games. I think that's true of other Switch games as well, where you're, in the era of we're now getting 4K TVs and stuff like that. I think this is kind of what you were saying about it feeling like a portable system that you could also put on the TV. Now, a lot of those games, the image quality just, especially if you're trying to blow it up onto a big TV, was not really supported. Like the art that the developers had created was not supported by that presentation. And so it's nice that is something that now that whole big library of Switch 1 games can now enjoy. At the very least, you can max out that dynamic resolution for games that aren't patched. And then, hopefully Nintendo goes through and continues to do these patches and third parties come through it and do some of this stuff, because it would be nice for those games to be able to have a better home on TVs on the Switch 2.
Definitely. And like, I will say this is a really impressive lineup for launch. Like, they've gone through and they've done a lot of games. They've definitely singled out some games that needed the improvement. Yeah. They've also singled out some that I think are just popular, like Mario Odyssey or something. But it's nice to have. Doing that for Zelda makes total sense. And it's easy to forget how long it's been. But Sean, Breath of the Wild and the Switch 1 was 8 years ago. Yep. I played that on a 1080p TV. I didn't own a 4K TV yet. And I remember when Tears of the Kingdom came out, Tears of the Kingdom actually runs better than Breath of the Wild on Switch 1. Because they made improvements over the years. But at that point, I had a 4K TV, and it looked worse to me, so I stuck to handheld more with Tears of the Kingdom than I had with Breath of the Wild. Now you put those games on your 4K TV, they look totally fine. They look very, not just acceptable, but like impressive on that display. And that's true of all the other like official patched versions I've played so far. And that's definitely cool. And I think... they have such a big library, but I think a lot of these, again, these patches could be pretty simple, because a lot of these games, it's not like they had problems on Switch 1. Mario Odyssey had no issues on Switch 1. But if you just give it that resolution boost and a little spit and polish, Switch 2 is more than capable of making these games sing, and that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big reasons why the Switch had that huge emulation scene. I mean, one of it is that it was easy to do compared to other devices. But also, I think there's just like a big community of people who wanted to play those games at like a much more modern feeling resolution. And that was like a means to do it. And that's where that whole like emulation scene with Yuzu and all that stuff kind of became so big in a way that I've never seen, certainly for like a modern console, the kind of fervor around that stuff. And now that's just like, it's nice that it feels like that's not particularly necessary, at least not like in this way, not in order to see these games in a way that feels like a more modern presentation, that this device can do that now.
Absolutely. And, again, it's not 100% perfect. There's that one issue of handheld for unpatched Switch 1 games, but that's still a pretty minor issue. And I will be honest, if I were coming from the original Switch, not the OLED, I would still be like the Switch 2 is an upgrade, because bigger screen, brighter screen, more colorful, that is a trade-off worthy of the slight resolution fuzziness. It's just because I had the OLED that I think like I feel that way. But if you're coming from a Switch 1, this is a pure upgrade. Then in terms of native Switch 2 software, let's talk about a couple of those. So obviously the big game at launch that is packed in if you buy the $500 version is Mario Kart World. Mario Kart World, I think, is, after 3 days with that game, without competition, the best Mario Kart game. It's phenomenal. It is a great video game. Like, it'll be high on my list for Game of the Year this year. It is just tremendous as a game. But as a Switch 2 launch game, like, it is graphically, I think it's hard to tell from like YouTube videos, but when you have it in hand and you're playing it, handheld or on your TV, and you really get into the meat of it, this is the most impressive game Nintendo has ever made graphically. And it is like, there are a lot of advancements they're not necessarily in the level of just pure graphical fidelity, because Mario Kart 8 was already a great looking game and it continued to look great on modern TVs all the way up to today. It's just a very well-made game. But Mario Kart World, like, the tracks are just so much bigger. There's so much more complexity going on. There are so many more character animations. The karts themselves are so much more animated. There are so many more effects going on. Like, it's honestly a little astonishing to see a Nintendo game doing this much stuff. My brother and I were playing Split Screen, the final Grand Prix last night, which has Rainbow Road. And the Rainbow Road in this game, the amount it is doing with like textures and particles and surfaces and color with the amazing HDR that this game has. Like, it's genuinely one of those, I kind of can't believe Nintendo made this. Like, this is shockingly modern for Nintendo. And that alone, like, it really is a killer app. Anyone who was, I saw some of the stupid comments of like, why would anyone buy the Switch 2 just to play Mario Kart? I'm like, because Mario Kart is the highest selling Nintendo game ever? What are you asking for? That would be like if, Xbox launched with Halo and people were like, why would you launch Xbox with Halo? What the fuck are you talking about? But like, even more than I think you would have anticipated, Mario Kart World is just a super impressive showcase for the Switch 2. It's not necessarily using a bunch of the like extra little bells and whistles like the mouse controls on the Joy-Con, but just as a pure graphical showcase, like, this is definitely a version of Mario Kart Nintendo never could have made on another piece of hardware before, and that is really impressive to see.
Well, I think one thing, this is obviously just from me having watched some videos of it, I think like Mario Kart World is getting a benefit of two different things. One thing is it's just the technological upgrade, right? It can run at a higher resolution, all that kind of stuff. The other thing is just like Nintendo's art style has just gotten so much better compared to Mario Kart 8. The last Mario Kart is a fucking Wii U game. And again, I'm saying this as someone looking from the outside, because by the time the Wii U came out, I was kind of totally out of the Nintendo stuff. I stopped owning Nintendo consoles. But from the outside looking in, Nintendo's art style to me just got really, really fucking bland at a certain point. And it's only in the latter period of the Switch that has shifted. Like, I think the clearest indication of that is Super Mario Brothers Wonder, right? Compared to the new Super Mario Brothers game. And there's maybe like a little bit of technological stuff there of that, like the technology can enable some of the like more cartoonish art style they're going for. But I think a lot of it is also just the philosophy of how they approach those characters and how they express those characters has changed at a certain point. You can see this with their like redesign of Donkey Kong, which, you know, has maybe elements of the movie design, but also is very much harkening to the classic Donkey Kong design. And if you look at footage of the Donkey Kong Bonanza, that, that the next game that they're doing, and the art style there's just this sense of embracing the world of animation and using animation techniques and stuff like that. And you see that in video of Mario Kart World with using squash and stretch on the carts and having them not look like rigid bodies, but they're cars that exist in a Looney Tunes sense, not in a like traditional video game sense. And it's just like it's helped them so much make their games look so much more lively and energetic and interesting that they have done that switch. And so I think Mario Kart World is just getting like both of those. It has a technology that can implement that art style in a modern format and do more with it and put more on screen and all that kind of stuff and build a bigger world, all those things. But also it's like the whole shift that Nintendo has taken in its general aesthetic is just such a huge improvement over what they had been doing, particularly if you go all the way back to the Wii U.
I think that's very true, and I think like Mario Kart 8 really shone in the world itself, like the tracks and all of that stuff. But I agree that the character models or the carts are not the most interesting versions of those. It's their kind of bog standard 3D versions. And yes, you definitely have Mario looks more like his Mario Wonder aesthetic. Donkey Kong is more like the old drawings from the Famicom or arcade manuals, all of that kind of stuff. And there's just so much life and character. It really is wild just how animated the characters are now, how much personality they have, even on all of the like gimmick stock characters. Like I have spent a lot of time racing as the cow because the cow is awesome and I love Moo Moo Meadows. And that cow has so much personality. When that cow you do a trick and you like jump over, the cow turns around and like smiles and waves at the camera. And it's like, man, cow, you're awesome. You have so much personality. And that's true of, the penguin or the Goomba or whatever other, like, again, kind of stock gimmick character you can put on there. And that's amazing. But no, Mario Kart World, I don't know if we have time to fully get into it today, how cool this game is. But I'll just say I have played all 8 of the Grand Prix, and I've spent some time going around in the open world. And I think it is the coolest evolution of Mario Kart you could possibly ask for, because it maintains all the stuff you love about Mario Kart of, having these competitive races and playing with your friends and having that party atmosphere. But the way the Grand Prix have become these contiguous zones. So if you don't know, now it's the same idea of Grand Prix in that it's 4 races in a row, but now those 4 races are on a contiguous space of land where in between the races, like the beginning of the second race starts from the end of the first race and just continues on into the next area. And that's really dynamic and cool. It makes you feel like you're going on a journey. And it also means that you're not always doing like repetitive laps, but you'll go from one race, you'll have this kind of in-between area that's more like a big open, like, road where there's like 5 different routes to go. Then you'll get to the main map and you'll be funneled into more of kind of a lap area. Then you'll be back in an open world area. And all of that's really fun. But there's also lots of good options. Like if you find a race that you really like and you're like, man, I want to do a 3-lap version of this, you can go into Versus and usually pick that race and now set that up as just a 3-lap version of itself. Or you could pick that race and say, hey, I want to do this race from here to that race, and you can get the in-between part. And all of that's really neat. And then the tracks themselves, some are purely new, some are inspired by past courses, but unlike in like Mario Kart DS 7 or 8, where they had the retro tracks that were straight remakes of those tracks, these are much more in the reimagining space. So it'll be like some of the same aesthetics and some of the same track elements, but it'll really be a new race. And then that area will extend into the open world part, and you'll have an area you can explore that's like, so like for instance, Moo Moo Meadows has a whole like kind of farm aesthetic around it that isn't just the track as recreated from the Nintendo 64 version of Mario Kart. So all of that is super neat. And then I do think like the standout of this game so far is probably going to be the open world mode, where you just go in and you get to drive around and pick your character, and the world is just very densely populated with stuff to do. Like it's fun to just drive around and explore, but if you also want to like be given challenges and stuff, racers will just show up and you can like, it'll say, hey, this is your target, and then you have to go chase that person and hit them with a shell shell or something and you get a little reward, or there's like these little, the blue blocks in the world and you hit that and it starts a sort of scripted challenge that you can do of like a little race or like collect these blue coins or get here in this amount of time, all of that kind of stuff. And so as an open world experience, it's just very fun. Honestly, one of the things that made me think of, Sean, is that you know how the Marvel Spider-Man, the Insomniac games, are really fun just to go into and just fly around New York, right? It kind of feels like they've made that mode for Mario Kart, where like the open world is just like, hey, do you just want to spend 20 minutes just like decompressing at the end of the day, driving around the Mario Kart world and seeing all the little details in the art? We've made that mode for you. That's awesome. That's so cool. And then, yeah, the tracks themselves are amazing. And the biggest thing I have to praise about Mario Kart World is the music. The soundtrack to this game is so killer. I need them to, like, put out a proper CD release of this soundtrack so I can fucking import it from Japan. Because it's a mix of, like, both, like, really amazing creative reimaginings and reorchestrations of classic Mario tracks and Mario Kart tracks. But then also just a lot of original jazz, where, like, a lot of the racing is just done to, like, proper jazz, where there's a theme and they just pass it around the ensemble, and you'll have the tuba going for a little while, and then it'll go over to the bass, and they'll do it for a while, and it's like real great jazz music, and I'm just enjoying the hell out of it. It's an awesome game. This is about as good a launch title as I think you could ask for.
It's good to hear, like, because one thing, I'm happy to hear, like, you described how the kind of open world of the Grand Prix stuff works, because that was the thing I just couldn't. And again, there just hasn't been, like, much pre-release stuff. And I have, like, had a hard time wrapping my head around, like, what is the game? Because when I look at... Because people are talking... And it's got, like, the open world and all this stuff. But then when I look at video of it, it just looked like a Mario Kart. I'm like... I mean, it looks like a very nice Mario Kart. But I think it's, like, it's hard to see... You have to, like... I guess, like, see, like, a more protracted demonstration of the game to get the sense of how that stuff is connected. But that's... I like that idea of the... tracks being connected in like one long contiguous thing rather than we're just constantly dropping out into a menu and you're loading into the next one in the kind of traditional Grand Prix. Like that makes sense to me in a way I feel like I just had never really kind of understood what the world part of Mario Kart World was, but that makes sense.
Yeah, like when you're playing a Grand Prix, you get through race number 1 and it does stop to like show the rankings, like who won and who lost. But then it goes immediately and you're back where you left off and you start going again from that spot and that starts the next race. And then, you know, you go through that. So it still has that rhythm of being 4 races, but it's 4 races through this world that is dynamic and contiguous, and it's operating on this like kart racer dream logic where, you know, the snowy mountain can be gotten to from, you know, the city area. And then a lot of the individual tracks are so creative. I think maybe the best single like high concept track in the game is there's one based on original arcade Donkey Kong where you basically race up the like big, you know, structure of like the construction zone, and at the end you have to drive under a big Donkey Kong's legs. That's fucking rad as shit, and I love that one. But there's a lot of cool ideas like that in here.
Very, very cool.
Yeah. In terms of other stuff I've played, the only other like full price game I bought, and this is actually because I had to trade it in some coupons, so it was free for me, was Bravely Default, the HD remaster. Bravely Default, one of my absolute favorite 3DS games. This is the, obviously, remaster for it. It is a Switch 2 exclusive. It could probably run on Switch 1, just to be purely honest about it.
I mean,
but
it
it's
is
not.
It is hilariously just called an HD remaster like it came out in 2012. Yes. Like, nobody calls these things that anymore, you know?
No. But anyway, it is a Switch 2 exclusive. It's very nice looking. It is very faithful to the original Bravely Default. And it's actually kind of cool to see like all of the watercolor art they did for the backgrounds in that game taken out of like very pixelated 3DS mode, and now they are just in full like 4K. They look very nice. Obviously the sprites are still very simplistic, but they look good. They've given them some upgrades. The cutscenes have been redone. Honestly, one of the biggest benefits is that now all the sound is uncompressed because it's not on a 3DS cartridge, so like the voice acting sounds much better. The music, which is the best part of Bravely Default, the Revo soundtrack, oh my fucking god. Revo is one of the musicians from Linked Horizon, so if you like yourself some Attack on Titan openings, you will like Bravely Default because its music fucking rocks. And they've also done a good job taking, I think, all the DS components that this game had, like how you use the 2 screens, or it had a lot of social components like Street Pass and some timing stuff where, like, you would like, there's a whole mode where you run this little city, and you would like, it's like a sim thing where you would say, okay, 2 people work here and this will go for 2 hours, and 2 people work here and this will work for 3 hours. They've successfully adapted all of that to the Nintendo Switch, which is nice. I know that game also has some new mini games that involve the Switch 2 mouse controls, but I have not gotten there yet. But I'm enjoying that. Definitely, if you like Bravely Default or you've never played it, this is a good version, and it's only $40. It's the same price it was on the 3DS back in the day, so zero inflation. In fact, that would be deflation, and that's kind of nice. So you can play that. And I did buy the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour because it actually got some pretty good reviews. The Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, let's just get this out of the way, it is a $10 game. It should be a free pack-in. Absolutely true. It is bizarre that it is a $10 game.
Welcome to the Nintendo Switch 2, motherfuckers. Give us your money.
Yes, exactly. You do kind of get jumped into it. Mario, kicks you in the shins and takes your wallet on the way in. But once you're past that, I actually think this is very worth it. Like, if you just want to get to know the hardware, or especially I think if you have kids who are interested in this kind of stuff, in the same way Astrobot sort of taught you the engineering of the PS5, this does that very well. Like, I've only played a little of it so far. I did everything with, you start on the left Joy-Con before you move over to the tablet screen, and I'm on the tablet screen now. But I've already learned a lot. I was actually very interested to learn about how have they improved the rumble. They explain what HD rumble is, where it is located in the controller, how it works, why it's better than past versions of rumble. You get into it gets into the magnets of the Switch 2 Joy-Con attached magnetically, and I learned, there are actually no magnets in the Joy-Con. It is in the system itself, and what it is connecting to is the SL SR buttons, which are now much bigger. The ones on the rails are made of steel, and that's why it connects so strongly. So stuff like that is really fun to learn. But then it's absolutely chock full of mini games that are actually pretty fun. And this is where we've got to talk about the Switch 2 mouse controls, because now you've got your Joy-Cons, you pull them off, and if you look on the middle of it, you can even see there, it's got the same thing that if you have, you take your gaming mouse off your desk, it's got a sensor. I assume it's not as nice as the sensor on your gaming mouse, because these things are $200. But it is a proper mouse sensor, and it's even got little feet on the sides of the Joy-Con rails so that it is even when you put it down on a surface, and you can use mouse controls. And this is actually, I think, one of the coolest controller gimmicks I've ever seen, because I actually think there's a lot of potential utility in this. On the Switch 2 UI, you can use the mouse controls anywhere. You just set your Joy-Con down and you can go through all the system menus and all of that as though you're using a mouse, which is kind of cool. But then the mini games within the Switch 2 Welcome Tour, one of them is just full on, Sean, an aim trainer, as you would get with a gaming mouse thing, where it's just hey, can you track these things on screen? Now, it's presented a little differently than an aim trainer on a PC. It's Nintendo-ified, but it is basically that thing. I took my Switch in here to my office, and I played it with the Switch in portable mode, just with this kickstand on my desk, and then I just used my mouse pad to play that, and it felt very intuitive, and I actually think it's pretty comfortable in the hand. The way the R button, what would be the bumper button, is even curved around the controller a little more than it normally would be, so that you can use it as your main mouse clicker when you're doing that mode. And it really does track on anything. You can do this very casually on your lap, you can do it on your couch, any of that stuff. Obviously, if you're playing something more intensive, you would want to do it on an actual surface. But there's actually quite a few games at launch that use this. I have played Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, but I also know there's a Fortnite port that has mouse controls for your shooting and everything. And I know Cyberpunk 2077 has full mouse support if you want to play it that way. And that's a first-person shooter, so that makes sense. But it's really cool. It works well. It tracks well. And I'm impressed by that. And that kind of leads me into talking about the hardware of this thing. I realize I haven't mentioned the Joy-Con. The Joy-Con 2 are the biggest improvement of the Nintendo Switch 2, I think,
That's
other
good.
than some of the internal technicals.
Yeah, because as someone who's my life as a teacher has been students who bring their Switch to play, either if we're doing stuff after school, and sometimes kids come and hang out when other kids are finishing up a project, or during lunch and stuff, and they have their Switch, and Mr. Chapman, you play games? I'm yeah. And then they hand me a fucking Joy-Con. I'm God, fuck, playing video games with this thing is miserable.
So let's be fair. The Joy-Con for the Switch 1, I think, were good for what they were for a first attempt at this kind of
concept. Yeah.
Yes. And I think they work fine as portable controllers. Sometimes they're fine in your hands, but obviously, especially if you're using one single one, those little SLSR buttons were terrible. They were not very comfortable to hold that way. The sticks did not have really the range of motion you would need to play a first-person shooter, for instance. Most of that has been addressed. They are taller and they are a little bigger in your hand, so they just feel very, like, my hand wraps around this thing very naturally in a way where the original Joy-Cons, I had to kind of cramp a little bit. And so that immediately, big improvement. The shoulder buttons, they're just a little bit bigger enough that, like, they're very easy to hit. The face buttons are bigger and they feel a little clickier like that. The sticks are hugely improved. Like, that's the first thing I actually noticed when I took the Switch 2 out of the box, is that, like, there's so much range of motion on these. They feel so smooth. It feels, like, really nice. They feel nicer than the sticks on my Switch Pro controller. Like, they're really good. So you've got those. And then, yes, if you're using SLSR, those are about 4 times as big. Like, they are so much bigger than on the old ones. And honestly, to the point that I might even go into accessibility and do some button mapping to just make these do other button commands and use these as extra buttons, because your hand just naturally rests on SL and SR if you're holding it vertically like this. And Switch does have full accessibility button mapping, so you could just go in and say, hey, SL is also A, and you could do some of that on your console if you wanted to. So they feel very good in the hand, they feel very good if they're connected to the Switch, all of that. Really great controllers. They have, like, just enough heft also that they feel like they're not heavy, but they feel good in your hand. They feel solid. I don't feel like I'm going to break this thing. I'm not going to snap it in half, none of that. And then, yeah, I think that those mouse controls are really impressive. They've got all the other bells and whistles that the Joy-Con used to have. And the magnetic connection is a huge improvement. I don't think there was necessarily a problem with the rail system on Switch 1, but it is night and day when you just take this thing and you just hold it next to the Switch and it just snaps in there. And then if you want to pull it off, you just hold this button on the back and you just pull. It is so much easier than those rails, and it means that when you're holding this thing as a big handheld device, it just feels like a contiguous piece of the console. It does not feel like,
there's not that
little
give
controllers that are tenuously.
The original Switch has that, like, weird give where, like, it feels like it sits and then falls to the bottom of, like, the Joy-Cons or whatever. Like, it always kind of felt like it was going to slip off. Like, the ones that I played again, this is mostly, like, students being like, Mr. Chapman, beat this level. I'm like, oh, fine. And then I always hold them, it's like, I don't want to snap here. I'm like a grown man. This feels like a device made for kids, is what it always kind of felt like.
Yeah. And that is also, like, even though I'm not 100% sold on the bigger size yet, it is an obvious benefit of the bigger size, which is that the Joy-Con get to be better. And, like, I have no desire to go rush out and buy the Switch 2 Pro controller in the way that I think a lot of people, myself included, felt the Switch 1 Pro controller was a pretty necessary purchase at launch just to have in your lap. These feel totally fine playing from the couch, and I'm really enjoying them. Other improvements to the hardware, you've got USB-C on the top and the bottom. They both charge. That's great. The speakers are a little louder and better. They sound really good. The fans are bigger, and this thing gets hotter than the Switch 1 did, but for totally understandable reasons. I don't think it gets unreasonably hot. Although if you pull it out of the dock after a long session, you will notice it has heated up, and you might want to, like, not go immediately from that into handheld if you're playing it that way. But again, I think that makes sense. But I think that covers all the basics of this thing. It's a very nice piece of kit. My reservations of it so far are very, very minor. And I will even say, while the price is obviously high, I have felt very little need to spend any extra on this thing, because out of the box, you've got Mario Kart World. You've got a bunch of if you've got a Switch 1 library, a lot of those games have already been patched and improved, and they're fun to revisit. If you've got Switch Online, you've also got GameCube games to play. You've got the Zelda upgrades for free, all of that stuff. And I don't feel like I need to go buy an extra controller because all my old controllers still work on it. So if I want to play multiplayer, I can just use old Joy-Cons or use my old Pro controller. Like, it is $500, but it's, for me so far, it's just $500. I haven't spent anything extra other than the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. That's $10. I did buy that. And I did get a little case today that was $10. But obviously you do not need those things at launch. Versus, like, the Switch 1, that was a $300 purchase, but I had to buy Breath of the Wild. That's $60. I bought a Pro controller. That was an extra $70. Those things start adding up, right? So this is so far, I feel like I am getting good value, all things being equal. Other than Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome To or should have been free, but Nintendo gonna Nintendo sometimes. And you know what? They Nintendo'd a lot less than they usually Nintendo for a launch.
Yeah,
and that's a win in my book.
If you're like a total newcomer, like if you have not had a Nintendo Switch, like that is where then you're like,
yes,
those additional costs, like, you know, you're gonna have to fork up your $70 to play Breath of the Wild or whatever, right? Like, so it's like if you're a brand newcomer, like I think that cost thing is a bigger hurdle. But if you're someone already in the ecosystem, it seems like they made it very smooth. That
yes.
Like, hey, if you're already subscribed to their online and you got all that shit, you got your old controllers, like you're good to go.
And to be fair, the Nintendo Switch is coming in on being the best-selling console of all time. So probably not a lot of people going into the Switch 2 totally cold, at least yet.
Yes. Well, you know, eventually they're going to want to expand that market base, but they don't need to do that yet.
Yes.
It's early days.
Yes. So for launch, at least, this is good. You know, I think there's room on the market for possibly a smaller version of the Switch 2 at some point, some equivalent of the Switch 1 Lite. If you could do that, but also still allow it to dock, I think that would actually be a very popular product, especially because, again, I do think this system is probably a little too big for a lot of kids. But we'll see. For now, though, I am very satisfied with this purchase. I'm excited to get back and play more of this stuff and check out some more of my old favorites with the new, you know, bells and whistles that they've given them. It's a very cool system. I'm enjoying my time with it.
And I'm just really excited now to start following all the rumors of the Switch 2 Pro that are inevitably going to start, you know, probably in about 6 hours from now.
Hey guys, just so you know, Nintendo's not making a Switch 2 Pro. Just fuck off. They're not doing that. They didn't do it for Switch 1. They're not doing it for Switch 2. Just go jump in a lake,
You're
please.
right. It's not a Switch 2 Pro. It's a Switch 2 Super.
All right. Sean, do you want to move on and talk about, to finish today, Doctor Who?
Doctor Who?
Dr. Billy Piper?
Maybe. That's not what they say in the credits. They don't call her the Doctor in the credits.
We are talking about Season 2 / Series 15 / Season 41 of Doctor Who, the second and, well, spoilers from here on out, final season with Ncuti Gatwa as the 15th Doctor. I think this was a awful season of Doctor Who. I enjoyed one episode of these 8, and a lot of the other ones gave me migraines, and then it ended with a just spectacular fuck-up of an episode. What did you think, Sean?
I don't think this is an awful season. Like, I think it is a very confused season of Doctor Who. It is a, like, tragically way too short season of Doctor Who. I think it is clear that there were lots of, like, big picture production issues. But lots of individual episodes I enjoyed quite a bit. Like, I don't know if I have, like, one episode that is, to me, like the great Doctor Who episode. Like, I think the closest that Shigawa has is a Stephen Moffat episode with the Mind from last season. Although really at a certain point it almost just feels like this is one big season of Doctor Who, or one relatively big season of Doctor Who with a like gap in the middle, a la the Moffat years. Like, it almost feels weird to treat them as two seasons at a certain point because of the truncated episode count. But I'll say that, like, I enjoyed quite a bit of the episodes. Lux, The Well, and The Story in the Engine were all episodes that I liked quite a bit. And I thought Lucky Day and the Interstellar Song Contest were fine, but not great. And then the opening I thought was very whatever. And then the 2-part finale had interesting parts. And then parts where you're like, okay, yeah, this really, this is not what they wanted these episodes to be, becomes pretty clear at a certain point.
Yeah, but what they wanted those episodes to be was also bad, because it ends with the Ronnie just getting, and then the Doctor goes, laser, brr. Okay, but in the past, you've been pretty critical of RTD finales, and I feel like this was the classic RTD finale on steroids. Like,
I actually disagree.
Every worst instinct. Okay.
I think we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit, but I guess my big take on the finale is I like that he goes, and then Ronnie and Omega, bye-bye. Let's deal with what the story is actually about. That is an almost Moffat more like approach to the finales, rather than the like, we're going to do our like whole song and dance in the flop sweaty, like we just need to throw everything at the camera for the entire runtime of 2 episodes. Like, that to me is more what I feel the Davies finales are. If the like, if what they were trying to do with the Poppy and Baby stuff worked, I would have actually, I think, liked the finale quite a bit. I think the problem with all that stuff is like all the legwork to get to that point does not work. I can see an alternate version of that that you could have gotten there. Like, I can see the story that Russell T Davies is trying to tell, but he just has not gotten the stuff he needs, or that is not locked into place to actually make that story work. But the like lead up to it is not anything that I have a problem with. The way the Ronnie is used and Omega is used, I actually kind of like the Ronnie in the finale. Omega is like a throwaway whatever, and I'm glad that he's just a throwaway whatever, because I would much rather have it be that than have Omega actually be the villain of that episode. Would have been incredibly tedious to me. But that's like my big picture take on that stuff for the finale.
Yeah, I really, and I hate to be negative about Doctor Who. I'm not coming in this with like guns blazing, because I was very positive on the last RTD season. So this is not like I have some pre-made, notion on this. I was hoping to enjoy this more. But yeah, I think the premiere was kind of whatever, but that is also by far the most characterization Belinda ever gets. Belinda is, I think, easily the worst companion of the modern era, and I'm absolutely including the Chibnall companions in that, because I think they at least had some screen time with the fucking Doctor. Belinda is just nothing, and then they try to hook a lot on her in the finale in a way that I found really, sexist, honestly. I think this season has some pretty significant problems with the women characters in a way that I found uncomfortable. Lux, I did not like. I think the animation is impressive, but I think that's a dumb episode. The Well, I thought was a dumb episode. Lucky Day, I hated. Story in the Engine, I thought was messy, but really cool. In a way, I would actually very much compare that to the 13th Doctor episode, the Demons of the Punjab.
Yes.
I would say it's like, it feels like an episode that Doctor Who had never done before, and it isn't perfect, but I'm really grateful for its existence, and I think it's a really cool idea that I think has some really cool execution and gives this version of the Doctor some great moments to play. Interstellar Song Contest, I think, is the grossest episode in all of Modern Who. I think it is like Kerblam on steroids. I found it offensive. And then I think the finale is Wish World has some fun in the way that RTD Part 1s often have some fun, and I think it devolves into the most gobbledygook, absolute nonsense bullshit that I've ever seen from this show. And then it ends with surprise regeneration, and I think this is a bad season. This is a really bad season of Doctor Who.
I think I would agree it's a bad season. Like, I think we just disagree on some of the specific episodes. But I think, if you're looking at it as a season of television, it just does not work. And it doesn't work on multiple levels as a season of television.
Well, and okay, so where do we want to have this conversation, Sean? Because also there is Ncuti Gatwa is gone.
Yes.
Now. And the whole show's, and this season introduces a bunch of plot lines that clearly were meant to continue that now might, but they're going to have to be with a different Doctor, right? This is an unfinished, that's the other thing. This is an unfinished thought of a season, because this was not at any point in its development intended as Ncuti Gatwa's farewell year. This was intended as the second of his runs that would have at least continued to a third, possibly more, and then it got cut off. Where do we want to have that conversation of, oh no, Doctor Who is in crisis again, versus these individual episodes?
I honestly don't know if we need to go in the individual episodes. I don't feel like we need to have disagreements on the quality of the individual episodes, because it's I don't have the energy for that. And it's not the conversation I'm really interested in having. The conversation I'm interested in having is this kind of, you have put together a whole timeline for us. I don't know if we have to read the entire timeline or how you want to approach this, but we've got the sort of here's how we got to this point, because I think what's interesting about what's happened here is just this kind of production crisis that I think is very clear, especially when you get to the end of the season, and kind of what does this mean, or what does this say about this era of Doctor Who?
Yeah, and what it says is not good. So do you want me to go through my little timeline to try to explain all this?
Yes, because you did a lot of work that I'm glad you did, because this is a lot of this is stuff that I basically knew, but I had not gone through and organized any of this information. So I'm glad that you've gone through it and done this for us.
Because so I one question before we get started. Had you heard the stuff about Gatwa regenerating? Because it was a surprise to me.
I knew.
When I got it spoiled by YouTube when it went up. So I hadn't seen the episode yet, but that's how I got it spoiled, and I hadn't heard all these leaks. But so you knew it was coming?
This is the leakiest season of Doctor Who I've ever seen. Doctor Who is a leaky show. To the point where even casually trying to look up stuff about it before the season came out, not trying to look up the leaks, just trying to know what's going on with the show. And I'm kind of, I follow certain community forums and stuff like that. I don't think there was a way to avoid finding out some of this information. Like, it was well ahead of the airing of the first episode. There were seemingly very credible leaks about Gatwa was going to leave. Fairly, like, I knew that it like I knew that the options for what was going to happen at the end of the last episode was Gatwa either regenerates and you don't know who it is, or he regenerates into Billy Piper. I knew that like a month or something before the last episodes came out, not even trying to find that information. Like, I think the Doctor Who community was not good at like keeping that information contained, let's say.
So before we get into the why of it, I mean, how do you feel about it? I obviously feel bad. I think this cuts off a potentially great Doctor at the legs, but I think he'll always be a potentially great Doctor because I think he had a really mixed run. I think his second season is a disaster. And I think, like, he goes... It is the most nothing regeneration since, 6 to 7. Like, it is so out of the blue. I felt nothing watching it. I think it's like none of the emotion, even the, like, ha, Sylvester McCoy is in a blonde wig filming this scene. It doesn't even have that level of emotionality to it. It really puts a damper on everything to have a Doctor this good get booted this fast in such a messy fashion.
Yeah, no, I feel the exact same way. Like, I think the obvious point of comparison is the Sixth Doctor, though I think Ncuti Gatwa is much more compelling than Colin Baker was. But Colin Baker was doing his damnedest, and he had, like, there were, like, flashes of what he was trying to do there that really worked in the handful of episodes that supported him. But I think there is just a similar feeling as what you got with the Sixth Doctor era, where it's like, they've really went for the fences with the characterization of the Doctor here, right? Like, this is a very kind of divergent take on the Doctor, which I'm way into. Like, I like what Ncuti Gatwa did, like, bring this, like, very powerfully queer energy to the character, I think is, like, really awesome and is a very different take, or at least, like, making it this overt is certainly a very different take. And I think that he has just, like, so much charisma in the role, but I don't feel like, because for a whole bunch of reasons, like the seasons themselves being short, even with short seasons, he also has episodes in both seasons that he's barely in those episodes. Like, they're Doctor Light episodes, even with the smaller episode count. Like, at the end of the day, he's not in many more episodes of Doctor Who than Christopher Eccleston was. Or if you're putting it to stories together, like, or Colin Baker, right? If you're ignoring that Doctor Who back then was broken up into smaller episode chunks. Although not for all of Colin Baker's, because they did the experiment with 45-minute episodes then too. But anyways, like, the point being, like, it's really not that different. Like, he is in that conversation in terms of, like, how many, like, proper full episodes was he really the Doctor in? It's not that many. And so it ends up in that Colin Baker territory also because, unlike the Ninth Doctor, there's not this clear singular vision of, like, this is the single story, right? I think the thing that the Ninth Doctor benefits from is that they weren't necessarily planning and from the jump for him to be a one-season Doctor, but it was a full, complete sense of a story that the single season told, and him being able to regenerate at the culmination of that very focused single-season story feels very appropriate, and then David Tennant gets to pick it up. Whereas with Ncuti Gatwa, I think you can see the idea of a single story thing here. There's, like, a clear, thing happening here with it. Starts with picking up this baby, this foundling that has, no parents or whatever, or their identity is unknown. And then it ending with this whole ethical dilemma around this child that is also a foundling that has nowhere in the world, and then being adopted by what I think originally would have been Ruby, quite clearly. Like, there is a clear story that I think they are trying to tell around that stuff, but it is so scattered, it's so broken up across the two seasons, across, like, a weird companion shift that is clearly not planned, that, like, whatever, like, idea that they're trying to execute on that bigger picture story for this Doctor just does not come through. And so you are left with a Doctor that feels vestigial, and kind of like the Sixth Doctor, you're, like, picking up the pieces of, oh, well, I can watch Vengeance of Varos, and I can watch, this episode or that episode. But, like, it doesn't feel like a properly defined, coherent era of the show, other than an era fighting with its own production is what it ends up feeling like.
I think that's totally right. Sixth Doctor is the one I grasp for, too, and I I actually feel very similar because I do love Colin Baker's work in those episodes. I find him very compelling even when the show is fighting against him tooth and nail. Colin Baker is just shadowboxing Doctor Who. But, I think he gave it a valiant try, and I think Ncuti Gatwa gave it a valiant try, and I think Gatwa probably had more good episodes than Baker did.
He did.
But,
yes, he definitely did.
But, the Vengeance on Varos comparison I do think is still good, because I also think, Boom is so clearly the best episode of his run. It is so head and shoulders above that even if there are other good episodes, there are no other Booms. Just like there are no other Vengeances on Varos for the Sixth Doctor. Although Colin Baker then had, a decades-long Big Finish run where he has fully redeemed himself. Well, he didn't have anything to redeem himself for, but you know what I mean. The Sixth Doctor has been redeemed, and I have to say, I don't think Ncuti Gatwa is the kind of actor who's going to be going to Big Finish, because I think he's going to Hollywood, and I think he's going to be a movie star. So we shall see. But let's go through the timeline, because I think, Sean, you just gave a very good reaction of why this all feels wrong. With the Sixth Doctor, why it was wrong is because BBC was trying to kill the show, and it was trying to kill the show so hard that they wrote that into the plot of the show and did the Trial of the Time Lord and all that, and they did a music video that fucking slaps, and you can go watch that if you want.
Doctor in Distress.
Doctor in Distress.
If you're looking it up. Oh my God. It's one of the most horrific tragedies ever associated with Doctor Who. Is Doctor in Distress.
And it's basically We Are the World, but instead of fighting world hunger, it is trying to renew Doctor Who.
Yes.
And I think we might need one of those again for the Disney era. Yeah. So if Ncuti Gatwa could maybe do one more thing for us and film Doctor in Distress 2, maybe that'll get Disney over the finish line. But let's talk about this, Sean. So I just had to put this timeline together. I started back in 2021, because July 2021 is when we learned that Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker were departing Doctor Who ahead of her third season had not aired yet.
Yeah.
But that's where we learned that, and we learned that she was going to leave after specials in 2022. Then that September is when we learned that RTD was returning as showrunner for Doctor Who, and that his production company Bad Wolf would be taking over creative control of the series from the BBC. BBC still owns the license and all of that stuff, but now the show, it moved its production location, offices, all of that stuff to Bad Wolf. In May, we learned on May 8th that Ncuti Gatwa had been cast as the Doctor. At the time, they told us he would be the 14th, but that was, of course, a cheeky little lie. Principal photography began on the 60th anniversary specials on May 9th, 2022, well over a year before those would have broadcast. So they were this is part of the story, and why I emphasize this, is RTD was way ahead of the curve at the beginning of trying to get the show ready years in advance, not months, but years in advance. We also learned that May about the Tennant and Tate return that was going to be happening, although we didn't know all the details yet. Whittaker's final episode airs in October of 2022, and 2 days after that special airs, where she regenerates into David Tennant, which confirms the direction for the 60th anniversary specials, that he would be the 14th Doctor, and then Ncuti Gatwa would be the 15th. We learn on October 25th about the Disney Plus deal. So the Disney Plus deal is that BBC will air the show in the UK, both on TV and then on their BBC iPlayer, while Disney Plus would distribute the show worldwide. And while it was not publicly announced at that time, the Disney Plus deal was for 25 episodes. How those 25 episodes got broken up was into the 3 60th specials, the 3 David Tennant specials, the 2 9-episode Ncuti Gatwa seasons, I'm including the Christmas specials there, and then the final 5 are going to be that unit spin-off, The War Between the Land and the Sea, which we have a trailer for and will be airing later this year. So those are the 25 episodes that Disney ordered. Principal photography began on season 1 in December of 2022, but at that time, Ncuti Gatwa was actually not on set yet. So the first block was 73 Yards and Dot and Bubble, which you'll remember are, one is fully a Dr. Light episode. The other one is Doctor is on a green screen for most of that episode. So he was not there to film yet because he was finishing the series Sex Education, which he had been a main cast member on. So Gatwa joined the shoot for Doctor Who in February 2023. And that's when his time on the show officially begins. They finished shooting season 1 in July of that year. And then we have our first mystery timeline entry, which is that somewhere in that period, Millie Gibson, who played Ruby Sunday, made a sudden decision not to return full-time for season 2. And no matter what Russell T Davies and company tell us publicly, it is very clear from copious behind-the-scenes evidence and very obvious on-screen messiness that this was not and was never the plan. Millie Gibson was very clearly intended to be the companion, at least through seasons 1 and 2. I think just the fact that season 2 begins photography in October of that year, it is essentially one big back-to-back shoot, backs that up, as well as a lot of other things like, hey, why is Ruby the main character again in the finale of season 2 and not Belinda? Like, she was intended to be there. Those scripts, we even have leaked scripts. Lux was originally written, for instance, as a Ruby Sunday episode. So all of these were originally written for Ruby.
I mean, there's so much. I mean, I feel like it's pretty clear that that's also like the casting of Retta Sethu, who I think is like, as an actress, is doing a great job. She's obviously just playing a sort of like the most generic companion possible, because that's just basically what's being asked of her. But she's doing the best she can. But she was, of course, in Boom. And I feel like that's a very obvious, like, well, we know who this person is. We know that she's really great. That's a much easier casting process to do that. But yes. And then the baby stuff in season 2 is just so obviously supposed to be Ruby. Like, it's so painfully obvious it's supposed to be Ruby that I think it's very clear, as you say, that no matter what they tried to tell you, that it's obviously Ruby was supposed to be the companion for season 2, and whatever happened, that it did not happen.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into rampant, reckless speculation territory. I don't know Russell T Davies personally, but I do know he has a habit of rubbing people the wrong way. While he has some long-term collaborators like David Tennant, he also has people like Chris Eccleston who have a fucking blood grudge against him and will never work with him again or even come back to the show just because his name is on it. And this has happened with other people, not just Chris Eccleston. Who knows? And I'm not trying to be reckless and speculate, but it is a consistent dynamic here. So again, season 1 finished shooting in July. Season 2 started shooting in October. None of this has even aired yet. The first RTD episode airs with the first of the David Tennant episodes, The Star Beast, in November 2023, while they're already shooting season 2 of the show. So you have all of that. Season 1 premieres in May. They also finish shooting season 2 in May. So they are at that point done. May of 2024. What will become all of Ncuti Gatwa's run has been filmed, but it has been filmed differently than what we wound up seeing. Yes. In June of 2024, in an interview with Radio Times, Russell T Davies confirmed that he was already writing season 3, with pre-production planned for August and filming intended to begin after Gatwa finished a run on the play The Importance of Being Earnest. That run would have finished in January, so speculation was that season 3 would begin filming either in January or February, in a schedule fairly consistent with what they had been doing up to this point. So they were just waiting on a renewal from Disney to pull the trigger on season 3, which Bad Wolf itself was full steam ahead on. RTD confirmed in that same interview that his plan was, quote, annual Doctor Who, no gap years, lots of content, on and on and on. And this is important because it tells you that the plan was never to do season 2 and then have a big gap.
Yeah.
So season 1 finishes airing in June of 2024, and in October of 2024, Ncuti Gatwa goes on the Graham Norton Show, which is a popular interview show in the UK, and he confirmed that his plan was to film the next season of Doctor Who in early 2025, consistent with what RTD had said in June. But in a giant red flag, the BBC actually edited those comments out of the episode of Graham Norton before it broadcast, which tells you a lot. And that same month is when Russell T Davies started making clear in public that there was no renewal yet from Disney, and that the plan now was to wait on a renewal decision until after season 2 finished airing, which at that point would be months away and well after the original plan of shooting in early 2025. So this is where you can see the inflection point that things are changing. Joy to the World, the season 2 Christmas special / premiere, however you want to call it, airs in Christmas 2024. And then Mystery Timeline number 2 item is Gatwa's decision to leave the show. Clearly happened somewhere here between October 2024 and February 2025. I would not even be surprised if the BBC editing those comments out of Graham Norton was part of the impetus of saying like, oh, it's really that bad, is it? I'm not saying that alone, but clearly this is where, and neither you or I are blaming Ncuti Gatwa for this, and I don't think anyone is. the fact that he was expected to just wait in perpetuity for the possibility of a renewal years after he had finished filming for the show. Like, this dude is a very in-demand actor. He is a nascent movie star. And the idea that he's just going to wait around forever for Doctor Who, it is just not fair to him, and I think everyone understands that. Like, I haven't seen any fans expressing anger at Ncuti Gatwa for this, and I think correctly so, because this is just an untenable situation.
Yeah, I think just, like, what's clear, and this is part of, like, also all the leaks that happened with this season, was, like, all those leaks intimated that the main thing that happened here was that Gatwa just, like, couldn't wait for, like, forever to find out if the show is actually going to go forward. And that is, you know, the impetus here, because I think that it's clear that he enjoyed playing the character. It's clear that he had an intention to keep playing the character at a certain point, but it's just, you can't expect, particularly an actor like him, who, as you say, is on such like an upswing in his career, to sit around and take, you know, I did like smaller roles or whatever, and not be able to make big plans for his career in case they all of a sudden Disney decides to do another season. So yeah, like, I don't think there's any blame to be given to Ncuti Gatwa. I don't think he did anything wrong or there's anything there. It's just unfortunate that this is how all this played out.
Yeah. So that leads to February 2025. Major reshoots for Season 2 are conducted. The main subject of these reshoots is the season finale, as this is where they film Ncuti Gatwa's regeneration. Based on leaks, the episode as filmed a year earlier, the original version of The Reality War, was reportedly largely the same as what we saw until the point where the Doctor goes down into that little bunker area to find Belinda and Poppy, and then from there to the end is largely reshot material. However, Billie Piper's appearance was not filmed here because the intention at the time was that the regeneration would be a cliffhanger. So Gatwa would, you know, throw the arms back, CGI yellow stuff comes out of him, and then we would cut before we see who he transforms into. Because obviously, February, the episode is airing in April, they have not cast the next Doctor, nor can they cast the next Doctor because they don't know if there's going to be a next Doctor because the show is not renewed. So that was their intention at the time. So the original ending for the episode, we also basically know. It involved the Doctor, Belinda, and the other characters dancing and celebrating, basically in a club environment, because we have photographic proof of that. Disney Plus Germany accidentally leaked an image, and you can see what the ending would have been. And leakers have additionally revealed that the mini Susan teases we got this season, with Carol Ann Ford coming out of nowhere to show up, would have culminated here with Susan and Poppy, who at this point was like popped out of existence, showing up outside that party, where Susan would have referred to Poppy as Mom, a cliffhanger that would lead into season 3, and also resolve the Susan arc, where the Doctor back in, I think it's Church on Ruby Road, mentions that he has a granddaughter but no son or daughter yet, so it's out of order for Time Lords. So this was all set up, and further evidence for that exists with interview footage of Carol Ann Ford on set in a costume that never shows up in the season as broadcast.
Yeah, and if there are any scars that are apparent in season 2, if the Susan stuff is like so glaring, because there's just no resolution. Right? There's no, like, a lot of this stuff, they did not elegantly square the circle, but a lot of this other stuff, like, you know, they still told a story. It maybe is confusing, but there's a story being told. The Susan stuff just disappears, and that was the thing I remember just being the most perplexed by. But, like, where the fuck did all that go? Because it was such a big thing set up in season 1. It was, they show Carol Ann Ford in, like, a weird hallucinatory way in 2 episodes of this season. And then it just disappears. And that's some of the stuff where, like, it's very apparent to even the most casual observer that something fucking really weird happened in the making of that episode.
I mean, I love Carol Ann Ford, and I don't want to, like, diminish her work, but why not cut those parts?
Yes.
Like, why are those in the episodes?
Yes.
It's baffling. And like, the only reason you would keep them is because you feel bad for Carol Ann Ford. But, like, you know, it's not her fault, it's not your fault, but you don't have the end of the story. You have to cut it. It's so baffling.
Yeah, it is just really, really bizarre, that they are there.
Yeah. All right. Season 2 premiered on April 12th, 2025, and at that time, as soon as 8 weeks from the end of the season, the plan was still for the cliffhanger regeneration ending, where, again, Gatwa starts regenerating, but we don't see who he turns into. However, and this is mystery timeline item number 3, at some point in the 8 weeks that this season spent broadcasting, Russell T Davies changed his mind, called in Billie Piper, who is obviously a personal friend acquaintance, for a very last-minute remote shoot. She films on a green screen with a skeleton crew and is then basically photoshopped onto Ncuti Gatwa's body for the regeneration. An effect you can kind of tell. It's one of the worst regeneration effects of the modern era, and speculation is that RTD makes this decision to try forcing Disney's hand on a renewal with a kind of attention-grabbing cliffhanger. Put a pin in that. You and I will come back to whether or not we think that's creatively defensible. I mean, it's not, but, we'll debate it more. Season 2 finishes airing on May 31st, with Gatwa regenerating into Billie Piper, and the episode's... the episode is so non-committal about it that it ends with... Because Jodie Whittaker is in this episode also, and it says, Ncuti Gatwa is the doctor, Jodie Whittaker is the doctor, and introducing Billie Piper, blank. Who knows? So in sum, what have we learned today, kids? Principal photography on Gatwa's episodes took place between December 5th, 2022 and May 24th, 2024, though Gatwa's time on set is really just February 23 to May 24. Most of the production work on everything we've seen from the Disney era was done before the bulk of that material had ever aired, and the wait for a renewal from Disney at this point has stretched literal years. There is no end in sight. Obviously, the BBC could choose to move forward independently, but that would require contract renegotiations and budget deals and all sorts of other stuff to figure out. That means that whether Disney renews it or whether BBC decides to go in their own direction, Doctor Who is in limbo in a way it has not been in limbo in the 21st century. I think that's fair to say.
Yes. No, absolutely. I mean, there has been, it has not always been the smoothest road, but there has been a clear handoff from Davis to Moffat to Chibnall to back to Davis that had a production shift, but timing-wise, there was no... In fact, timing-wise, it felt like more regular than it had felt in a while.
Yes.
Yes, but yes, it is now in a sort of... I suspect that the BBC still wants to do more Doctor Who stuff because it makes the BBC a lot of money. I, however, do not think that Disney... I would be surprised if Disney did any more. I mean, obviously, one other thing here to mention is we do still have that unit spinoff, The War Between the Land and the Sea. They showed off a teaser or whatever of that. That has a very Torchwood, that third season of Torchwood. It's got that kind of vibe to it. It just looks like it might be fine. That's still coming out. But if I were a betting man, I would say that will be the last Doctor Who on Disney Plus thing is going to be that spinoff, which was part of the original deal they made way back in 2022.
I would agree 100%, Sean. I mean, the one thing I didn't include on my timeline is the complete collapse of the streaming business model, which is also what happened here. It isn't just Disney being a shitty business partner, although... shitty business partner. Mm-hmm. Let's not take that for granted. But that, when this deal was made, this deal was signed in 2021. Yes. And that is at a time when streaming is still on this COVID-era boom and everyone's on a sugar high before you have the big Netflix stock collapse and all of the David Zaslav stuff over at Max where everybody starts contracting. And Disney has not been immune to this either. Obviously, everyone is cutting corners and they are cutting budgets. And Disney, I don't think is... Disney at that point was trying to expand Disney Plus, and Doctor Who made sense as an expansive endeavor. But they are not in an expanding mode anymore. They are in a focus on IP existing content mode. And Doctor Who isn't part of the Disney brand. It does not make sense in their current business model. I would say it's a 99.9% certainty that Disney is done with this. And I think the biggest thing now is if there are any contracts a right of first refusal or anything, that's what the BBC has to grapple with. And then they have to figure out budget, and then they have to figure out if RTD wants to make the show on that budget, and if he doesn't, someone else has to come do it, and the show's in limbo.
Yes, and that's it. You're very much right. That I think that is what this feels like is just TV, whatever TV is these days, is in just such a strange place. It seems like there are things trying to figure it out, The Pit, this year felt like hey, we're figuring out you can make fucking good TV. that exists in the streaming model that can be viral and people can really love and can be very good, and also has like a high episode count and it doesn't need to cost $5 billion every single episode or whatever.
Yes.
It feels like we're still in this shift, and like the promise of streaming of Disney Plus Doctor Who was one in an era where getting a Disney Plus subscription costs you like 1/10 of what it costs now, because you have to sell a fucking arm and a leg for a month of Disney Plus these days, especially if you don't want to watch ads with whatever it is. It's just that whole market is so different and so volatile. And it's very frustrating because it had so much promise. It should be said that, the production of this era of Doctor Who was just so premium feeling, right? Like the production values, the way the show looked, like the effects work, the way that like the really incredible practical effects work in particular they did, the amazing sets and all that going back to the 60th anniversary special. Like there was such a great step up, it felt like, compared to the Chibnall years, which were so garish, so ugly, so poor looking in production. And there was something that it felt like there was like a lot of hope that this, if it could sustain itself, you could do a lot of really cool stuff with Doctor Who. But then you have the small episode counts that just are not worth that price. I would much rather have much cheaper looking Doctor Who episodes, but you get 13 episodes in a season, than getting really premium looking episodes of Doctor Who, but you only get 8 or 9. Like that trade-off is not worth it. Like maybe you can get that premium feel for the specials and that level of production, that's great. But it's like, man, the thing that's so brutal, and it's just true of so much streaming TV, is that reduced episode count just does not work for so many different kinds of TV shows. For most kinds of TV shows, it just doesn't work well. And particularly for Doctor Who, it's just not a long-term strategy for the show that is viable to only have 8 or 9 episodes a year.
I think part of the story of this season, in fact, and why I think part of this season doesn't work, is I do think, while the increased budget was fun at times, and still impressive, there are episodes I despised this season that look very good. The Eurovision episode, I think, is a bad episode, but there's that shot of everybody being shot into space, and it's like, oh my god, how did they do that? It's amazing. But I do think when you take a writer like Russell T Davies, who is prone to sometimes writing gobbledygook, yes, and you give him all the money in the world so that he doesn't necessarily have to write actual narrative, I think season 2 was a rock and a hard place hitting each other, where I think a lot of these episodes are episodes that just definitively would have been better if you didn't have money to do the big crazy ideas, and RTD would have had to sit down and creatively write his way out of an idea. I still don't think it is a coincidence that the best episode of Doctor Who Russell T Davies has ever written is Midnight, the lowest budget episode of Doctor Who he has ever written, right? Like the one set episode where he really had to drill down as a writer. And I'm not saying this bears its head all the time, but it bore its head a lot this season. I think the Robot Revolution is one that just descends into pyrotechnics. Lux, I think, I enjoyed a lot of the animation stuff, and I really wished there was more of a story and a theme to hang it on, because it just felt like an excuse to do big budget stuff, not an excuse to tell a cool story. I think the Interstellar Song Contest is that way. I think Wish World is that way. I think you have all of those problems. Then you combine it with the 8-episode season that isn't enough. It's really not enough when you're trying to introduce a new companion who will become the mother to the Doctor's child. Oh my god, you do not have enough time to do what you are trying to do. And then I think the third branch of this problem is that I don't think RTD ever figured out the balance he wanted to have of being welcoming to newcomers, which is what makes sense for a new Doctor, new era, new kind of story, and on a new platform with Disney Plus. And at times, like Church on Ruby Road, or like the first half of season 1, it felt very newcomer friendly, a la, Moffat's first season with Matt Smith. But then you would do we're bringing back the villain from Pyramids of Mars. Yes. And it's look, I know Pyramids of Mars, you know Pyramids of Mars. Does the average Disney Plus viewer know Pyramids of Mars? They should. Masterpiece episode, but it's a 50-year-old serial. And then for this season, they're doing the fucking Ronnie, and they don't explain who the Ronnie is. If you don't know who that is, the Lady Time Lord?
I mean,
didn't we have a Lady Time Lord? Wasn't she called the Master? It's gobbledygook.
To be fair to the Rani, there is no explaining who the Rani is.
Okay.
Like, she's from Time of the Rani and Mark of the Rani. Like,
but Sean,
all she is a bad guy Time Lord. Like, that's the only thing that the character has going for her.
Okay, but compare introducing the Daleks or the Master or the Cybermen or any of the things RTD brought back in his original run. He didn't treat any of those as assumed knowledge. All of those were done with a sense of, we are aiming this at new viewers. And I think this season, like, it confused me at times, Sean, who these fucking people are. And I know this Doctor Who shit. Like, if, like, the Susan stuff, for instance. Guys, the last time Carol Ann Ford showed up in this show, you know, was like when fucking right after JFK's assassination. Like, what are we talking about that you can just drop Susan without a bigger explanation of this stuff? And that was a problem last year as well. And so I think when you combine that the budget was inflated in a way that I think played into RTD's worst instincts, the fact that you have these tiny little seasons and this very split personality of, are we for newcomers or are we doing hardcore classic Doctor Who extensions? This is a really confused era of Doctor Who in a way it didn't feel at first like it would be.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. I think like the big thing where it felt like that was, for the first time, was at the end of season 1 or whatever we call these, you know, this Disney Plus season 1, when you bring Sutekh back, where, you know, I still really like the notion of what they've done in the episodes where they do it this way, of the gods coming back or whatever, right? Of the, like, we have like opened up the world of like fantasy or whatever into Doctor Who, and doing that at the end of the David Tennant specials. And then you get, you know, you have your music one. Last season you have Lux. I know you didn't like Lux that much. I like that episode. I like what that episode was doing. And I like that visualization and that concept. You know, it's all pulling from the Mind Robbers from the second Doctor era, but not in such a way that you need to have seen the Mind Robbers and need to know the Celestial Toymaker stories. Like, you don't need to know any of that shit. Just like the notion of the, like, the world of fiction and fantasy kind of corroding the world of reality that the Doctor lives in, that I think is really compelling, and there's a really great story there. And there are chunks that they do that really well. But then it ends up being, and now it's Sutekh, the God of Death. And then in season 2, and this is why I'm happy that they just sort of like shuffled Omega off stage, because it's like, and now it's Omega, the Time Lord, God of Death. I like, you know, what even fuck is Omega at post the Three Doctors is a confusing question for any Doctor Who fan to answer. You know, you can watch, what is it, I think called Arc of Infinity, I want to say, is that Fifth Doctor story that is just incoherent. But like the status of Omega, all that, it's like not interesting. It's only works for me as a throwaway gag that you then get rid of. And I'm saying that makes it a good use of anything. But I was like glad that Omega was not a like kind of focal point for the ending of the season the way that Sutekh was for last season. Because it's like that's not an interesting version of this. The gods come back, like a reality is eroding, you know, the fantasy and all this stuff is taking over the world that these characters live in. That's just not a cool way to explore that idea. It's not a creative way to explore that idea, to turn it into a big monster that you have to defeat, you know? And there are elements of like Wish World that I think does a good idea with some of those concepts of seeing the Doctor having to sort of like live this like normative life and all that kind of stuff. But it just doesn't have any real follow through, because it all boils down into, we got to get the big monster or whatever and all that kind of shit. And then the instinct of that big monster must be tied to something from classic Doctor Who, where it doesn't need to be, right? That's the thing that's great about the 11th Doctor stuff is, you know, if maybe Stephen Moffat never really explained all the stuff particularly clearly at the end of the day, when you got to the end of the 11th Doctor's run, about why did the TARDIS explode and all that kind of shit, you know, that gets very confusing if you're trying to explain it all in detail. But the notion of like the silence and all those things were all new ideas that were new creatures, new monsters that he pinned those ideas on. And that worked really well as a reintroduction into the show for fans coming back, or as an introduction completely to the show for utter newcomers, particularly in America, where that's when, you know, Moffat was making that big push. And yeah, I do think it's just a problem with this season with RTD is he had all the tools, he had the right ideas for how to create a new, different kind of Doctor Who that could break from some of that classic continuity stuff in ways that felt fine, and give you a new vision for the show. But then he couldn't really commit to it. It always came back to, well, let's do something with Susan. Let's do something with Sutek. Let's do something with the Ronnie. Let's do something with Omega. And at the end of the day, that doesn't all come together. Like, that does not all work. Like, you can't do both things at the same time.
It's, I don't know how to phrase this, but I feel like I also, I want to call these things out because we criticize Chris Chibnall for some of these ideas so much. We shouldn't, this is the same problem. Chibnall would do this a lot too. And speaking of Chibnall, the fact that I also think RTD had a very schizophrenic relationship with extending ideas from the Chibnall era and how much he did or didn't want to do that. Like, boy, if you missed that Fugitive Doctor stuff, there's some stuff in this season that's confusing as shit.
No, even if you saw it, it's even more confusing because that's in the story in the engine, which I think we both agree is the best episode of the season. It's inconsistent, but it's very interesting. In that one, they have the Fugitive Doctor character show up or whatever, but it makes no sense because the Doctor's like remembering this whole adventure with like Anansi's daughter and all that stuff, which is cool. I'm fine with all that. That's interesting. The only problem is there is absolutely no way the Doctor would remember any of that stuff because the entire point of the whole climax of Chris Chibnall's run on the show is that the Doctor has the opportunity to get back her memories of those previous Hartnell lives, and she decides not to get those memories back and leaves the fob watch with those memories closing away and lets it all go. Like, that's literally the culmination of that character's story arc. Do I think that culmination of that story arc was done well? Fuck no. It's terrible. My God, it's fucking awful, the Flux season. It's so bad. Like, it makes this season look like a masterpiece. But it is the climax of that fucking story, and it is fucking hilarious to, like, take in the, like, we want to keep the Fugitive Doctor thing, but totally ignoring the whole thing of what that Doctor's entire, like, character arc was supposed to be about. It is, like, it's very weird. Like, it feels like, either do it or don't do it. Like, either ignore that's the Timeless Child and all the implications of that, or you have to at least have, like, a basic level of consistency to it, because anyone who watched those seasons would be able to tell you that the Doctor should not remember that. Anyone who watched it and paid any kind of attention. Like, this is not a minor plot beat. It's like one of the most important plot beats of an entire season of Doctor Who. It is very weird to just, like, not even have a gobbledygook explanation for it. They just gloss over the fact that he should not in any way remember any of the shit at all, if this is what you're saying.
Yeah, so, not good. And then, okay, I don't even know how to address the Billie Piper thing. Because, like, on the one hand, it is such an obvious show of desperation that it feels like the moment where you just close up shop and go, if we're this desperate, why bother? But also, we are reviewing the show, and we have to take it at face value that, hey, the Doctor looks like Rose Tyler now, that lady he really wanted to fuck. That feels wrong. That feels wrong to me in some really fundamental way. The Doctor being a woman? Fine. Go for it. Jodie Whittaker showed up in this episode, and I thought she was great in those 5 minutes. That was awesome. But why? But there's just, you know what I mean about, like, the gender dynamic of this that is, like, fucked? And that's before you get into the, hey, our first black Doctor regenerated out of David Tennant and into Billie Piper. How's that for Doctor Who's so woke now, Sean? It's so woke.
Well, yeah, it's just like, it's more, as you're saying, of like the desperation of the, like, we need to cling on to something that's going to get headlines. Like, that's what it feels like. RTD is scrambling to figure out something that will bring attention to it. And so he's using whatever tool he has available to him to do that. But it's like, I think especially after you already did this with David Tennant, like, you know, like you can't do this again. Like, it's, you've already played that nostalgia card. This is an even weirder version of it. But I also think it's, like, clear that I don't think RTD has any idea of what that actually is. Like, it is incredibly conspicuous that they do not actually credit her as the Doctor, because they have done that for every modern version of the character. They have done at introducing David Tennant as the Doctor, and introducing Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor. Like, that's how they have done these credits for the modern version of the show, as like a tradition, basically, at this point. Like, that's what they've done when they've done, here's John Hurt, introducing John Hurt as the Doctor, and they do it with, like, that has a whole special one where he turns to camera and shit. But they have, like, done that multiple times as a, like, whole thing, and it's very conspicuous that they don't do it here. I don't know what to make of that information. But it feels just like, so he doesn't know I don't think he knows what that story is. I don't know if he thinks like this is the Doctor. Maybe it's Rose Tyler from the other dimension who has, done bio transferred her essence into the Doctor to solve the crisis of the multiverse. And, whatever, who fucking knows? You can do whatever the fuck you want. I don't think he knows what that is. It just feels like pure desperation.
And here's the other problem. The last normal regeneration we got was 8 fucking years ago on Twice Upon a Time, which is when Peter Capaldi regenerates into Jodie Whittaker. That is the best regeneration scene we've had since then, because that was a normal Doctor says goodbye, new Doctor says hello. We all feel I remember that was awesome. It was like, hey, look, it's Jodie Whittaker. It's our first female Doctor. She also is really good in that first scene, and it's what a regeneration scene is supposed to be, which is you feel sad and then you feel excited, and it nails it. And we haven't gotten anything like that since, because Jodie Whittaker has to regenerate into David Tennant, which overshadows her exit. And again, I like what they did with the David Tennant stuff, but this adds up, because then you have David Tennant bi-generate into Ncuti Gatwa. Well, I kind of liked that too, but then you have Ncuti Gatwa regenerate into Rose Tyler, and it's like, now none of those work, right? Because you've done it 3 times. Now regeneration is just purely a gimmick. And we've also had, in the Chibnall years, we've had all of the Timeless Child bullshit, and we've had the Fugitive Doctor. And so now regeneration means nothing. And it's been, again, 8 years since we've had a normal progression of this series from one Doctor to the next, where it feels like the show has a future to move on from. And it's like, again, you can defend any of these individually. Like, the 3 David Tennant episodes they did are great. But when you add that and the bi-generation and this, it all feels like a mistake to me.
Yes. It's just like, it just feels like, I think RTD had like a vision for what he wanted for the show. I think that execution of that vision would always have been messy in certain places, but it feels like that vision completely crumbled for various different reasons that you can see in that timeline. And he's just like scrambling for something to try to keep the show alive, where at a certain point, I think the healthier thing to do would be to say, like, okay, like, walk away from it. And if that means that Doctor Who is off the air for some indeterminate period of time, and then somebody else will pick it up at some indeterminate point in the future, that's okay. Like, I think it's okay for Doctor Who to take a break. Like, the modern version of the show has been on for a very, very, very long time, and I think it would be healthier for everybody involved to accept a break rather than to try to hold on to it so tightly you start strangling it. Because the thing that's more worrying to me is just like so suffocating the show by doing all these things, by, as you say, treating regeneration as this like big gimmick to get like little hits of interest, by doing something bold with your regeneration and doing that over and over again. Eventually you're just diluting the fabric of the show. That already happened, I think, to large extents over the course of the Chibnall years with a lot of the choices he made. And it felt like RTD had the potential to kind of right the ship more. And now it feels like he is also just kind of like strangling the show by trying to hold on to it too tightly.
Because here's the thing. If this had ended as they reshot it with Ncuti Gatwa regenerating and cliffhanger, it would be frustrating, but that would be if you had to leave it there, you could leave it there. And Doctor Who could restart whenever you wanted, right? And you could do it Chris Eccleston style, where we never see the regeneration and he's been the Doctor an indeterminate time, or you could do we pick up from that moment. You could do either way. But when it's Billie Piper, now you have to address it. You can't just start a new season. You have to do something with this. And the show can't just go off the air for 10 years and not address that, right? Like, something has to give. And so that becomes this extra frustration where, and also now you're stuck with that. The next time Doctor Who comes back, it has to be another 2008 nostalgia hit. And it can't be a fresh slate. Like, what this show desperately needs is another Chris Eccleston or Matt Smith. But it's going to get another David Tennant. Like, obviously he's coming back because if Billy Piper's there. Obviously, if Dave Tennant is willing to do it, they're going to back the dump truck of money up to his house and get him back. Like, that's just so obviously the desperate move they're pulling here. And so the show just cannot move on. And I agree it needs a break. And I also think, as much as I like a lot of the ideas RTD has given, I think the next Doctor Who creative team needs to be someone who has not touched Modern Who. In the same way that the creative team in 2005 was not anybody associated with the show in the 60s, 70s, or 80s. Because we're in a different era, right? Like, part of why 2005 Chris Eccleston Doctor Who works is because RTD knew Doctor Who, loved Doctor Who, but he was of a new TV era, and he could write for the 2005 era of television and make that adaptation. But in 2025, that's not who RTD is, it's not what TV is, and it's not what Doctor Who is. And I think the next person to write Doctor Who has to be someone who knows what TV is today and can treat Doctor Who with that clean slate and not have any of that baggage from the 20 years that this show has been on the air in the modern era.
Yes, I mean, it's just like the show is so long in the tooth in this incarnation, right? Like, it's obviously an ancient show if you're looking at it from 1963, but a show from 2005 is an ancient fucking show. You know, like, the kids that I'm teaching, were not born yet when modern Doctor Who was a thing. It's just like, it's so old that, I think the thing it needs is a creative team that, as you say, has a very fresh perspective. Like, obviously it could be people, because of how old the show is, it can be people who grew up watching modern Doctor Who, and have a love of it from that. But as you say, have like less preconceived notions for how to make a TV show and all that kind of stuff. I think the other thing that the show desperately needs is it needs a new Time War. The way that the 2005 show had the Time War to just kind of wipe the slate clean. Because the continuity stuff, I can follow it to a certain extent because I have watched all of it. But even I am like having a hard time of keeping track of like, okay, so what's the status of Gallifrey and the Time Lords at this point? Like, I'm having a hard time sort of figuring out, like, when the Ronnie says that that the Time Lords are all sterile. I'm like, is that because it's always been like that, you're saying? Or is that the thing that the Master did? Because that's not what the Master said in the season 9 episode, but I don't remember that episode. But the season 12 episode, sorry. But like, I don't remember a lot of the details of that very, very, very long piece of exposition that was about the length of almost the whole episode. Like, there's just a lot of stuff like that is, I think, would be fine to have technically, as long if you didn't address it, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But RTD, by like trying to bring the Ronnie back and Omega and Sutek and Susan and making these old references, it's just so clear that the like larger lore of Doctor Who at this point for modern Doctor Who is so fucking convoluted. It's so much more convoluted than the old show used to be. Like, the old show had created certain amounts of baggage, but it also was not, because it was not a serialized show in almost any way, shape, or form at all. It just kind of made shit up as it went along. And if Atlantis had been the topic of a previous episode of Doctor Who, it's like, oh, fuck it, whatever. We'll just do Atlantis again because I want to do an Atlantis story. And I don't care if it's been done twice. I'm going to do it again. They didn't give a fuck. And so you definitely got weird inconsistencies. There's the whole unit dating, did it happen to the 70s and 80s, all that kind of shit. But it didn't particularly matter. And with the Time War stuff with Christopher Eccleston, it was a good way of saying, let's create an even playing field where newcomers to Doctor Who and old fans of Doctor Who are both in the same boat, that like we can kind of build this larger history of the show anew because something so huge has happened in the interim. And I just feel like something that needs to happen to reset all this stuff, because I just can't keep track of what's happening with the Daleks. with what's happening with the Time Lords in Gallifrey. Like, I don't know. I can't tell you what the status of it is anymore.
The other way I would phrase that, Sean, is it needs a status quo again. Because this show has been running, since Chibnall took over, this show has been running on constant status quo disruptions.
Yeah.
And you cannot make a TV show that way. And what you're asking for, Sean, well, Stephen Moffat gave us all that because he left the house so in order. He had brought the Time Lords back. He had created a status quo. He'd wrapped up all family business. And now Jodie Whittaker was free to go live in a Doctor Who universe that was populated and was open and had no continuity baggage, none of it. And instead, we brought back the fucking Last of the Time Lords bullshit, and we made her the Timeless Child, and we did all this stupid bullshit, and now we're at this point where we've had just in the last 8 years, we have had so many massive status quo disruptions that the continuity is incoherent. Where, like, you know, when Ncuti Gatwa says, I'm the last of the Time Lords, it never registers to me, because I saw 2 doctors who were not the last of the Time Lords in 11 and 12, and had years and years of development on that. And it is just, the world has become so small and insular and self-referential, and like all that work Moffat did in the Capaldi eras to rebuild it and leave Doctor Who as like this bright future has just been fucking demolished. And RTD is responsible for that too, not just Chris Chibnall. You can't lay it on his feet anymore as like the only guy who did it, because RTD had a chance to try to wipe that slate clean, and he definitively said no.
Yes, I mean, as far as we know, most of the universe is still destroyed from the flux. Like that's still technically has happened, and you know, RTD referenced it in that Celestial Toymaker episode. Yeah, you're right. That's like there just has been no coherent status quo for the show. And it's just sort of floundered in that status. And it's what makes it, you know, it kind of feels like reading a modern day comic book or something, like a Spider-Man, mainstream Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man comic, or Batman or whatever. This sense of like, man, this thing is so old, and they've been trying to build off of this same story and continuity for so long. It's just lost its own sense of gravity and has fallen apart. Or like the modern day MCU is the exact same way. That it's just like, I don't fucking know what's happening. I don't know how any of this stuff is connected. There's no sense of grounding to anything. And that's something that, you know, Doctor Who, as fanciful as it is, because it is so fanciful, because Doctor Who is a show in which anything can happen, that grounding is actually like more important than you would think. That there needs to be a sort of like solid footing for the audience to be able to like appreciate what's happening, because everything that's happening is so insane and so, you know, imaginative and so outside our existence. We need solid fucking terra firma from which to appreciate those things, and that's just not something that Doctor Who has had since Chris Chibnall's first season. It's been a very long time.
Yeah. I need a status quo again. I need a Doctor who's around longer than 5 fucking minutes.
Yeah.
You know, just all of this stuff. And yeah, I think the right answer is probably for the show to take some time off, but then you get into the Billy Piper of it all, and it's like, what the hell do we do next? I don't know. But here we are.
I mean, you know, the Billy Piper thing can be Doctor Who TV movied, you know? It could be like, I guess it happened at some point, I don't know. You know, like the Doctor being half human is like, oh yeah. You know, if it's a long enough break, you can ignore that stuff if you want to.
If it's a long enough break, but we also live in this continuity-obsessed culture where people aren't just going to let that fly. Like, that's part of why I feel like RTD felt the need to, like, canonize all the Chibnall stuff, is that people would write very long Reddit threads if he didn't. And, like, I'm not saying that's good, but it is the stupid pressure that exists. And I also think that's why you need a new writer who is immune to that and can say, maybe I'm just not going to look at Reddit, and I'm just going to write my fucking show. That'd be great.
I mean,
that'd be great.
You also just need a market in which, like, TV shows can like exist in a proper way. And maybe we're getting there, but it's like the streaming shit. It's just so volatile that, I mean, you know, that just so feels like the show is a victim of many things, but that is a big one.
Here's my pitch. Yeah. Here's my pitch. Here's the streaming network that I think could make this work. You're gonna laugh, but I'm right. Peacock should buy Doctor Who.
Hell yeah.
And Peacock, which needs hits. And it is also a network that is NBC, Its big hit so far has been Poker Face, which is very much a Doctor Who-esque, episode of the week kind of, not Doctor Who-esque, it's not sci-fi, but you know what I mean. It is an episodic anthology thing. They expanded it in season 2 from a 10-episode season to a 12-episode season, so they are all on board for this. And they don't have the kind of money Disney has, so they can't give Doctor Who too much money to begin with. And I say Peacock comes in and says, hey, we will make 16 Doctor Who episodes a year, we'll air it, we'll market it. You're not going to have a lot of money, but you know what? That's okay, because for the first 50 years of your existence, you didn't have a lot of money, and you're going to write Doctor Who again. I think that's the right place for Doctor Who to exist. It doesn't have to literally be Peacock, but something like that. Like a network that's hungry and needs something, but also is not, like, flush with material resources.
Yes, I mean, it's not going to have a lot of money, but, hey, they'll be able to, like, cut and do a second take of something, and that's not something they could always do in the 60s.
When William Hartnell just would mess up lines and we'd move on.
They're like, we do not... Look, we have to be out of the studio in 10 fucking minutes. No, we're not redoing this scene. Like, fuck you.
I feel sad. I hate to be critical about Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Okay, two other things I liked this season, and they're both from the finale, I guess. I want to stress again, I really did like the Jodie Whittaker cameo.
Yes.
Does it make any plot sense? No. But I thought she was great, and I think, like, I'd love to see her in a proper multi-Doctor story one day. She just had a great energy for that, and I liked her and Ncuti Gatwa together. And Kate Stewart,
Hell yes.
Gemma Redgrave, always love her. Thought she was great here. She, especially now that the show is just melting around her, she is such a, like, steady presence. Like, she really is this series Lethbridge Stewart, not just the name of the character, but this sense of someone who is a rock, because she is the most consistent presence of all of modern Who, and she still kills it every time. And I love Kate Stewart, and that is one reason I don't know if I have high hopes for that spinoff, but she deserves it, and I hope it's good.
Yeah, no, she's awesome. I agree with you. Like, she's been particularly good in these past couple seasons, and God, so I was looking it up. So she's from The Power of Three, which that episode came out September 2012. She has been on Doctor Who for 13 years. Like, fucking shit. When we talk about that the modern era of Doctor Who is old, someone who premiered in the last 11th Doctor season has been on the show for 13 years. That makes me feel fucking old. I remember doing the podcast for that episode, because that episode is not good.
Nope, but it is, you know what? It is a Chris Chibnall episode, and I did just say my two favorite things this season were Chris Chibnall character creations. So, high five, Mr. Chibnall. There's some ththings you did that I don't hate.
Yeah, and I'll echo what you said about Jodie Whittaker. Obviously, I've, I suffered through all the Chris Chibnall stuff, but she got, her performance got quite good by the end, even if the writing still never got good. And it is like Russell T Davies, for all of his flaws as a writer, he's still very good at writing characters and writing dialogue, and it's just like the naturalness with which he picks up, I think, in just the writing, the voice of that character, and slots it into her story in a way that's, like, honestly way more elegant than what Chris Chibnall was doing in those specials. But, like, the references to Yaz and all of that, there's a clarity to the character writing in those scenes that is, like, really nice to see Jodie Whittaker have. And it is like, if we're going to be mired in, like, old Doctor Who, like, nostalgia still forever, like, one thing the show could do is just do fucking some specials with old doctors and just say, yeah, fuck it. Let's just do a Peter Capaldi episode and a David Tennant episode and a Jodie Whittaker episode and put that out in this year. Like, if you have to do stopgaps, I would much rather that than let's throw Billy Piper in here and do whatever, like, I think if you're going to be mired in the nostalgia, that would be a way to do it. That we still have a lot of these great actors who've played the Doctor. Give them an episode of TV or whatever to play, or a special or something would be an interesting approach when the show is in this kind of, like, weird, like what feels like we're now in the second version of the Wilderness Years.
That would be very fun. Do a little mini season where you get each modern Doctor to do a one-off. I mean, you could do, because that would just be a Big Finish, but with pictures,
Exactly, yes.
Like, you could do that very easily. Ask Chris Eccleston if RTD isn't on set,
Yeah.
will you come do this? If we keep him, he won't write it, he won't produce it, he won't be there. We promise. You can pick the writer. You can you can be in charge. We just want you to play the Doctor again. You don't even have to shave the beard, Mr. Eccleston. You can still look like that. It'd be great.
Yeah, well, we'll write around the beard. Look, they did the 5 Doctors in the 80s, and fucking all the only part that Tom Baker showed up in was his, fucking archive footage from an episode that never was finished, and we just did a bad computer graphic effect over him to put him in a cage. It's fine. We do a lot of things.
Okay, I would also watch that, a special where you have like Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi, David Tennant, Jodie Whittaker, and then you have Chris Eccleston showing up in a video feed of like deleted scenes from Rose.
Yes.
That'd be pretty great.
It'd be fantastic.
There you go. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other Doctor Who thoughts before we stop this segment?
I love Doctor Who, and I wish it could find itself again.
I wish it loved itself.
I think Doctor Who does love itself. I just wish it, I wish it was given all the support that it needed to flourish again.
All right, finally today, Sean, do you want to do our monthly 10 segment?
Yes, I have created my monthly 10 list. This is something that, it was very funny. Last night I had forgotten this, like, oh shit, right, I need to do that. I had, during my, one of the tests I was doing, the many tests that we have to do in Texas, but I was proctoring a test, I just had scribbled on sticky notes all the ideas for my list. And I had forgotten to type it into computer, but I had taken fucking screenshots of the sticky notes. So late last night, I'm like, oh fuck, I have to actually put the whole proper list together. And I like was on my phone looking at the sticky notes, being like, all right, let me put this into Google Doc and actually organize it. But I got to put together my top 10 list, which is what you gave me, Jonathan, a top 10 high school novel film adaptations by a director I most dread. This was, of course, inspired by us covering The Great Gatsby, and also me talking about watching Romeo plus Juliet by Baz Luhrmann for the 5 billionth time. And you very cruelly decided to say, Jonathan, or Sean, in your imagination, come up with what are 10 other movies like that you feel like if I was a high school teacher, I would have to show this movie to the kids, but it would be just painful and just slowly eat away at my soul over the years. And that's what I've done. So I've come together with a list of 10 things. I did not type up, I did not go extra with this list. I didn't type up a whole crazy thing for every single one. So we'll just vamp off of these ideas. The ones near the bottom of the list, it kind of starts with some movies that would probably not be like good movies, but movies that would be maybe interesting to see. And then by the time we get to the top of the list, it's some really like horrifying shit to contemplate. At least it is for me. And so let's get here. This is my top 10 high school novels with a film adaptation by a director I most dread. My number 10, the one that would be least offensive, that I'd actually be interested in seeing this, even if I don't think it'd be a good movie, would be M. Night Shyamalan's The Scarlet Letter. I've maybe picked this one mostly was thinking about like that the fucking Village is basically like half of a Scarlet Letter movie that then goes in a really weird direction and has a monster in it. But I think the aesthetic works really well. I tried to pick topics like books that would fit in some way, would pair with the director. So I think the aesthetics of it would work well. But I just think that M. Night Shyamalan would find a way to make, either he would write new dialogue or he'd find a way to make Hawthorne's original dialogue the most like hokey, unbelievable shit you've ever seen in a movie, which I think is kind of, for me, with Shyamalan, one of his kind of like Achilles heels as a director, as like anytime a character says anything in any of his movies, I'm like, I can't believe what this person is saying. It just doesn't fit together. But of all the ideas I came up with, I think this is a fairly inoffensive idea, M. Night Shyamalan's The Scarlet Letter.
I like it. I think here's my casting based on other M. Night Shyamalan movies. Bryce Dallas Howard is Hester Prynne.
Yep.
Josh Hartnett is Reverend Dimsdale. Okay. And then I think you gotta have Mark Wahlberg as Roger Prynne / Roger Chillingworth. There you go.
There we go. Thank you very much. That's very good casting. All right. My number 9, to make this very clear, this is a director that if this director made this movie in like the 80s or the 90s, it'd probably be very sick. But this is like if this dude made this movie now, this would be a modern day Tim Burton's 1984.
Oh, God. Yeah. I don't know. I think the real Tim Burton is still in there somewhere, but it's deep. You only catch glimpses of it. I liked the Beetlejuice sequel, but boy, yeah, this would be rough.
Yeah, and I just, it would be wrong for a billion different reasons, but somehow he'd find a way to fucking put Johnny Depp in this movie. and it would just be it would not work. But you can see like it would be that kind of movie that as you're watching it, like in your head, you would be seeing like the Edward Scissorhands era Tim Burton doing 1984, and you're like, that would be fucking sick. It would be kind of a weird movie, but that would be fucking sick. Like the aesthetic would really nail it. But then you're stuck watching this like CG fucking awful mess and trying to ignore Johnny Depp being there and being like, well, this is the movie that I'm actually being forced to watch. All right, my number 8. I'm pulling my Baz Luhrmann card. My number 8 is Baz Luhrmann's The Crucible, the classic Arthur Miller play about the Salem witch trials, and of course also about 1950s McCarthyism in America. This was, of all the things I was trying to think of, like what would be the most offensive fucking movie to associate Baz Luhrmann with, and I do think that this would be the one with like very heavy, very important thematic material that I do want him to turn into some sort of like pseudo jukebox musical. I want some song numbers in there. I want the most garish fucking colors imaginable for Puritan era Salem, Massachusetts. Like it's just the most inappropriate fucking story for him to do, and yet at the same time there is like the like affair at the heart of the story, and all that kind of stuff, that there's enough juicy love bullshit in there that I think that he would be attracted to that part of the story, and everything else around it would just be so offensive through his lens.
Great Gatsby had the Jay-Z soundtrack. I think today Kendrick Lamar is so hot, I think you've got to have him do it and have some Crucible diss tracks in there.
Oh,
and have someone in the dialogue quote the line, probably strike a chord, and it's probably A minor. Just do right? Like you've got to have that in there somewhere that someone says.
Yeah. And then we can we get like a cameo for Daniel Day-Lewis from the like actual good Crucible movie? Just like he could be in the background of a shot somewhere just to pay homage.
I think only if you catch him unawares. I don't think Daniel Day-Lewis is coming out of retirement for a cameo in a Baz Luhrmann movie, Jean.
You don't know. He maybe wants to try something new. All right, that's my Baz Luhrmann one. All right, my number 7 is Roland Emmerich's Moby Dick. So I picked this for the, obviously Moby Dick has an absolute incomprehensible number of characters, and so I do think it fits Roland Emmerich's, there's a billion fucking people in this movie, and a bunch of the characters almost work, but none of them quite work, and it just bugs you. I think obviously he'd be very attracted to going incredibly over the top with the special effects at the end where the ship gets destroyed and Ahab gets fucking strung up. There'd be a very ostentatiously CG big white whale in the movie. And so I think, it would fit his sensibilities, and it's just nothing about the substance of the story would ever come across.
It'd be interesting. Sean, can you tell me what Roland Emmerich's most recent movie was?
I literally looked this up yesterday because I was like, is he even still alive? Because I couldn't think of what he did, and I've already forgotten what it was.
It was Moonfall, the disaster movie about the moon falling to Earth, I think. And it cost $150 million and made $60 million.
What?
This came out in 2022. It stars Halle Berry and Patrick Wilson.
What? Donald Sutherland's in this movie.
Yeah.
Fuck.
One of his last movies, I guess.
God, that's depressing.
Holy shit. Yeah.
But yeah, it is amazing how Roland Emmerich has just made one movie. Isn't it crazy how he's only ever made a single movie and he just kept making that movie? Because I had when I was doing my sticky notes, I had 2 different sticky notes. I had one that I was jotting down directors and one that I was jotting down books. And it's like, for a long time, I couldn't figure out what do I pair with Roland Emmerich? But I knew I wanted a Roland Emmerich one. And then I had the light of oh yes, Moby Dick. That's the closest to a disaster movie I can think of for classic novels. And man, oh my God, that movie would fucking suck.
That would be amazing.
Another movie that would fucking suck. My number 6 is Robert Zemeckis' The Odyssey, which has to be in the style of his Beowulf movie, which also in my head comes out like 2 years or something after his Beowulf movie. I also want Gerard Butler to be in it playing Odysseus. I don't even know.
Gerard Butler is not in that Beowulf movie, Sean.
Who is in the Beowulf movie? Who am I thinking of?
That's Ray Winstone as Beowulf.
Oh.
It's clearly going for a Gerard Butler affect, but it is not Gerard Butler.
Maybe they animate him to look like he's just Gerard Butler.
Yeah. But no, that's Ray Winstone as Beowulf. But I know what you're talking about here. For the 5 people who have seen that Beowulf movie, would it be the same kind of thing where, like, you're watching and you're like, man, if they just shot this in live action, it would be pretty good? Okay.
Yes, yeah. I want it to be like, it's not a terrible movie, but it's just kind of like a soul-sucking movie because of the, like, horrifying fucking CGI, performance capture. I don't even know if it was technically performance capture at this point.
It was, yeah.
But it's like, it's like wait, he did Polar Express, right? Also, it's just that, just like, why not just make a movie, my man? Like, if you're gonna do an animated movie, do an animated movie. If you're gonna do a live action movie, do a live action movie. But why, Bob Zemeckis? Why do you have to do this? And then to put on top of that an even harder story to adapt in the Odyssey, because his Beowulf movie, from what I remember, was a valiant effort. But Beowulf is not a particularly easy thing to try to adapt. And he tried to do the whole thing. Like, he put, like, Grendel's mom and the dragon in it, which is a lot. So I feel like he'd be compelled to try to do the whole largesse of the Odyssey. And man, that would not work for a single movie. We'll see what Christopher Nolan does. But that's
Beowulf was the middle entry of his trilogy that was the Polar Express, Beowulf, and then the Christmas Carol. All the CGI, which, maybe we'll have to make that a topic someday, Sean, while we're on our bad movie kick.
Oh my God.
Jesus.
I don't want to watch those movies again. All right, my number 5. This one is for you, Jonathan. We watched Our Great Gatsby, and you had a particularly acerbic reaction to the Jack Clayton Great Gatsby movie, and I thought, what other great classic high school novel could Jack Clayton make the most boring movie ever out of, even though it shouldn't be that hard? And I came up with Jack Clayton's Of Mice and Men. A novel that has good movies, is an easy it's a layup. It's like the biggest layup in the history of fucking American novellas ever is Of Mice and Men for doing a movie adaptation, and he would absolutely have found a way to make it the most boring movie ever. It, of course, would have had to have been made in, like, the 80s or whatever, because Jack Clayton is no longer with us. Rest in peace. But I do think that he would find a way to make it even more dull than his Great Gatsby movie.
Rest in peace sounds a little bit sarcastic in this context where we're just shitting on this poor man, but yes. Rest in peace, your movie would have sucked. Of Mice and Men by, oh my God. And it would have had, like, big movie stars who would have been so boring. It's still, Robert Redford would have been in it, and we would have been going, how did you get rid of Robert Redford's charisma? It should be impossible.
And yet, he can do the impossible. And he did.
Thank you, Sean.
You're welcome. All right,
this one.
My top 4, these are the ones that are just, like, soul eroding for me to, like, even contemplate this movie existing. I've got a good top 4 here. My number 4 is J.J. Abrams' A Brave New World.
Oh, God.
I want the story has to be, like, stupidly fucking Hollywoodified. Like, A Brave New World is, a very kind of, like, social novel about this guy living outside of their dystopia who's, like, a quote-unquote savage, who's, like, people like us, like, seeing the horrific nature of the society of the Brave New World. Of course, it would have to turn to a big action story about John the Savage trying to overthrow the Brave New World. It would also have to just end at some totally inexplicable point in the story to suggest all the ideas of, what could happen next in this story? What else could this fucking Brave New World all do? Cover it in lens flares top to bottom in the most disgusting way possible. This is a book that I taught when I was a student teacher doing 11th grade. I taught A Brave New World, and just the thought of J.J. Abrams' fucking garish, disgusting aesthetic in that movie or in that book, in that story, it haunts me.
You would also have to turn the Brave New World into a mystery box where we never find out what it is. We never see it. It's just purely out there and for our imagination.
Yes. Well, there's this whole character who's the guy, like, he's like the minister of whatever, who explains to them the history of the world. And just, like, give us a little bit of that character, but you just not quite enough for you to ever put it together. It's like, no, but there's something else. There's definitely something more going on here for A Brave New World 2. And then luckily that movie would never be made. There's no Brave New World 2. Even my most horrific nightmares, they wouldn't find a way to make a sequel.
Brave New World into Darkness.
a braver, newer world. Ugh. All right, my number 3, this will give everybody nightmares, is director of Cats, Tom Hooper's George Orwell's Animal Farm. I want my totalitarian fucking, satire, but delivered to me with recognizable Hollywood actors that it has to look like Cats. It's those effects, it's that whole thing, but it's like fucking pigs and shit. And I really, really need to see it, please. I want to see a Taylor Swift pig. I just need it. I want this all, please. But do it.
Yes, but it's Tom Hooper, so you also would have all of your shots with all the, like, negative space compositions, all of your Dutch angles, all the other bad stuff he does. Because he's a terrible director even without CGI.
And it needs to be a musical, but it's like they're all fucking singing on the set, and most of the cast aren't people who are particularly good singers, but he's making them do all the singing. Like, it has to be all this shit.
Yeah. Russell Crowe in Tom Hooper's Animal Farm.
Yes, he's Napoleon. He's the main pig. God, this is the one that is like really horrifying, but also I would be most fascinated to see exist. That's like almost terrifyingly plausible to me. There's something about this that feels like there's like a universe half a step over where this movie got made, where Cats was a big hit. He's like, well, what's another, anthropomorphized animal story I can get? Well, the greatest one of all time, Animal Farm. Let's go. All right. My number 2 is Zack Snyder's Catcher in the Rye.
Oh, that's mean.
We need the scene at the middle of the movie where Holden Caulfield, hires the prostitute, but then he can't go through with it, and then the pimp fucking kicks the shit out of Holden. I need that in, like, this big, elaborate, fucking slow motion fight scene that makes Holden feel very heroic. I mean, the whole thing also has to, like, completely misunderstand the character of Holden and kind of hold him up as this kind of, like, thing to be idolized in some way, and just kind of misread the whole thing in a slightly fascistic manner.
Yes, well, because every time he, like, takes a drag on his cigarette, it would be in slow motion in the rain with, like, an incredible silhouette behind him. The scene where he's running through the fields of wheat in his imagination, or the rye, would have to be, like, a fucking, like, action scene in his head, a la Sucker Punch, the movie he did with, like, all the dream sequence, action sequences. Yeah. Also, it would have to be incredibly long. Yeah. Did you know, Sean, do you want to guess how long his Rebel Moon movies were in their director's cut incarnations on Netflix?
No. How long?
204 minutes for part 1. For part 1, 173 minutes for part 2. And this is a space a space fantasy version of Seven Samurai, a movie that is on its own only 207 minutes long. So he made Seven Samurai in space, but fully twice as long. So I think Catcher in the Rye has to be a part 1, part 2, each 3 hours long.
Yes. Yeah, and you're telling me that they didn't greenlight more Rebel Moon movies. I wonder why.
No. Not yet.
But yeah, I mean, for me, I can just so clearly see, like, the fucking Man of Steel trailers, the shot, like, the him in the rye and all that shit, and it's just, like, like, that kind of color grading he has in his movies. Like, it's so vivid in my mind's eye. And just the way he'd totally fuck up how you portray Holden Caulfield. Yeah, that one would be really bad. But my number 1, this is also my favorite book I've taught when I was doing 10 honors. I taught this book, and I love this book. And this would just crush my fucking heart, is Michael Bay's All Quiet on the Western Front.
I mean, to be fair, the recent All Quiet on the Western Front they made isn't that far off from that. But still, yeah, no, it would very much miss the point. A book about how war is so pointless and bad, and that at the end of the day, it is just a bunch of death that is quiet. But it would be Michael Bay. Oh yeah, Shia LaBeouf in All Quiet on the Western Front.
He'd be Paul. I suspect that Michael Bay would maybe slightly misunderstand the homosexual subtext in the novel, would maybe not fully come through for him. Yes, I think, like, somehow he would find a way to make it feel weirdly jingoistic, even though it's fucking German troops are all of your main characters, and yet somehow you're like, man, this makes me want to support the American military, huh? It's like, what's going on here? I want a lot of product placement in it as well, please. Find some way to do that. But yes, just the idea of fucking Michael Bay with a movie that has the word quiet in the title alone is very funny, but this would just kill me. But it would also be the one that like the kids would be like, "Oh, we got to watch the movie, Mister. I saw the trailer for the movie. Are we going to watch?" He's like, "Yeah, you want to watch the one from the 1930s? No, not that one."
Would they? Michael Bay, I don't think, has been hot with the kids in a while. Like, do kids in history yearn for Pearl Harbor Day, where they get to watch the Josh Hartnett Pearl
No, but
Harbor
this would
by
have
Michael
to be
Bay?
a new movie that had like just come out that they would have seen a trailer for.
Okay.
No, I think they would, like, especially if it was on Netflix. I mean, I have not taught All Quiet on the Western Front since like the newer version came out. And so I don't know if they how that would go, but this is like when I have done things that are tangentially related to movies. That has how it's happened, including one that just like fucking killed me, where we were doing this was during the informational unit, and there was some article we were reading that made a reference to Tanya Harding. It was like because it was some like article about like Olympic sports, and one of them was like, "Yeah, Mister, they made that really old movie about her." I'm like, "What? Old? You mean I, Tonya? That's not an old movie. Yeah, that really old movie. It's like, it's 2017. I'm like, no, you're not allowed to call a movie from 2017 an old movie, you little gremlins. Stop it." But you do that. Like,
even for them, that's Margot Robbie. Margot Robbie is only 34. Like, and she was an established star by the time she made that. What are you fucking talking about, old movie?
They
Fuck
would
off,
have
kids.
been 4 years old when that movie came out.
Well, they're too stupid to know better. Fuck off, kids.
But at least in our dimension, though, we can all rest safe knowing that Michael Bay has not, and I believe will not, make an All Quiet on the Western Front movie. But that one, oh, that would be rough.
All right. Speaking of rough, we will be back in 2 weeks.
Wait, Jonathan,
for our fantastic.
I got to give you your list.
I'm trying to escape from it.
No. And hey, I'm not giving you a negative list. You know, you gave me a list to crush my soul. I want to give you a list that lifts you up. So we're coming into this period now where we're getting Fantastic Four, we're getting Superman, we're getting all these new superhero movies. And so I thought I would do a superhero movie related one, but I wanted to do a fun one, Jonathan. One thing that's common in superheroes and comic books is the idea of the multiverse, the infinite multiverse, where there are infinite numbers of universes where anything can happen. So I want you, Jonathan, to come up with the top 10 superhero/comic book movies that could exist in the infinite multiverse that you most want to see. This could be, director pairings with like superheroes that already exist. If you want to pair a director with a Batman movie, you could come up with your own Batman movie. You could, of course, come up with movies that adapt characters that have never gotten the privilege of being on screen. Or you could fix history's greatest mistakes like Morbius. If you think, I know who could make a great Morbius movie, and it's this director in this decade. But I want you to think through, like, in any combination you could, what would be the top 10 movies, comic book movies in this infinite multiverse you most would want to see, whether because they're amazing or because you just couldn't help but look away from them.
So this would be like, you're not saying like Morbius meets Hulk the movie. You're saying like Morbius by Francis Ford Coppola,
yes.
2 years after The Godfather?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I want to see what if Kurosawa Akira did a Batman movie before he did Ron. Like what you can come up with whatever combinations of how that works, but that's what I want to know.
Well, I can't wait to tell you all about Ozu Yasujiro's Paste Pot Pete next month.
You can make it a reality on your list, Jonathan, if you want.
All right. Next, that'll be next month's monthly stuff. Before then, we do have our topic, which will be in a couple of weeks here, where we will be doing our Fantastic 4x4 episode, where we talk about the 4 Fantastic Four movies that have already existed as we look forward to the Fantastic Four First Steps, which will hopefully not be like any of the other ones.
Yeah, I don't know. I still haven't seen the Roger Corman one. Maybe that one's fucking great. Who knows?
We're going to find out.
Next time on Purely Academic.